Good morning and welcome to another episode of your favorite weekend analysis and political program, The Big Issue. My name is Godfred Akoto Boafo. Excuse me for that. And like I said, my name is Godfred Akoto Boafo. These things do happen. Once again, welcome to The Big Issue. And it's a week where two things have been the standout issues. And one can call it a campaign. It's one we've been on for years, and it doesn't seem to be ending, and that is the one against illegal mining, popularly known as Galamsey. Several strategies have been put in place, several operations. Some have called it a jackboot approach. Some have all kinds of alternatives. But in this week, just more horror stories seem to emerge. Everybody, I'm sure, has seen the video of the shootings that were happening in the eastern region. Blew people's minds away. I mean, incredible images coming there. And then, of course, the minister himself, Mr. Abujanapo, has been moving around and touring some parts of the Ashanti region. Some of the sites were absolutely unseemly, the kind of degradation that the environment has been put through. And then also the impact on our cocoa farms and our cocoa farmers as well. So the Galamsey is being felt everywhere. So today, once again, we'll spend a considerable amount of time discussing the scourge known as Galamsey and why it is so difficult to make progress in this so-called war against it. Then the second part of the show, of course, we'll discuss the economy. The IMF arrived in the country on Monday to begin official engagements with the government. And quite a few things have come out of that. We finally heard from the finance minister for the first time in a long while. Spoke about debt restructuring and some of the misconceptions and bits of misinformation, as he sees it, that has been put out there. And all in all, saying that transparency will be key in their engagement with the IMF. That being said, alternatives have also been put out there. Those who have spoken about what the government needs to do if it is to be really able to stem Ghana's economic downslide. So we'll be spending the next 3 hours also discussing these two topics on The Big Issue on Citi 97.3 FM. Yeah. Welcome back to The Big Issue on Citi 97.3 FM, also on Citi TV, and as always, it's an interactive program. So for those of you who want to keep up with us, you can send your messages and comments on Twitter via WhatsApp lines, and our WhatsApp lines are 0549 986 996, 0549 986 996, and 0550 58 5832, 0550 58 5832. On Twitter at Citi973, Citi TV GH, and of course on my own at East Sportsman. Use the hashtag The Big Issue to send your comments, questions, suggestions, anything you might have. And then for those of you who prefer Facebook, we are streaming live on Citi 97.3. That's our Facebook page. Also on Citi TV GH. Do share the link for the live stream, and you can also leave your comments. And if you don't miss out, just check us out on YouTube, CitiTube, CITITUBE. Subscribe to the channel when you get there, and you can catch up with whatever episode of The Big Issue that you have missed. So with that out of the way, let's come in. And I will start, before I get to Galamsey, I'll start from the economy. Bread and butter issues. Galamsey is bread and butter as well. But the IMF has been in town as the government looks to resuscitate. I guess that is a good word to use, resuscitate an economy that is on its knees, for want of a better word. That is it, yeah. That is on its knees. So it's been a busy week for the government. But just before I get to that, another issue that came up that I just need to point out, this whole ECG business with their system, I hope it's been fixed. I'm looking at the front page of the Daily Graphic today, and it says that ECG audits system, fierce cyber attack. And it says that the story says that the Electricity Company of Ghana is undertaking a comprehensive audit of its system to establish what caused a technical failure that has affected service to many of its prepaid customers around the country. So the National Security Ministry and the Cybersecurity Authority are supporting the National Electricity Distributor to determine what could have happened to its system and how to forestall a future reoccurrence. The Director of Communications of ECG, William Boafo, who disclosed this in an interview with the Daily Graphic, said there was a high suspicion of the system having been hacked, hence the support from the Cyber Security Authority. Quote, "We have done an initial assessment and it was more than the challenge we suspected. Given the magnitude of the issue, a possible system hacking has not been ruled out. So the national security and cybersecurity experts are currently helping us to undertake a comprehensive assessment to find out what happened and how a reoccurrence can be prevented. The challenge is being resolved in phases, and while we are at it, customers in the Greater Accra, Central, Eastern, Western and Volta regions can visit our district offices to purchase electricity. Also, the team is working to restore the systems in the affected areas in Kumasi and Tema, as well as the third-party vending centers and the mobile app," Mr. Boafo stated. So this is information for those of you in Accra, in the Volta region, Central region, Eastern, Western, and then Ashanti and Tema areas as well. This is the updates coming from the ECG. Yesterday I was in town myself, and the queues were mind-bending, to say the least. Almost all the district offices had been besieged by customers who could not purchase power. And the ECG perhaps also needs to talk about what happens to customers who, through no fault of theirs, have had no power for 4 or 5 days. Are they being compensated? How do you make up for this? And perhaps a bit more information. At least they've been forthcoming. They are suspecting a cyber attack. What kind of cyber attack was it? The coming week, I guess, will bring more answers. So with that piece of information out of the way, let's talk about the economy. And the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, says government will fast-track negotiations with the International Monetary Fund to ensure key aspects of the program are reflected in the 2023 annual budget statement. The finance minister said no agreement has been reached with the fund on the parameters of debt operations, as government is still in the process of completing its debt sustainability process. So he spoke at a press briefing on Wednesday, and according to him, the negotiations with the IMF have been smooth so far. So we'll listen to the finance minister a bit, and then when we return, we'll begin our conversation.
The IMF negotiations. The formal negotiations for a fund-supported program began on Monday, September 26, 2022, and discussions are advancing smoothly. The IMF mission will cover a period of 10 days, and in line of His Excellency the President's dialogue with the IMF Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, negotiations will be fast-tracked to ensure that key aspects of the program are reflected in the 2023 annual budget statement in November 2022. Government is committed to ensuring that a comprehensive package is negotiated with the aim of restoring and sustaining macroeconomic stability, ensuring durable and inclusive growth, and promoting social protection. Therefore, the IMF, World Bank, and the Ghana team are currently undertaking a debt sustainability analysis to inform the program negotiations. In addition, the IMF and government team are working to update the medium-term macro-fiscal framework to inform IMF program design. Also, the government team and the IMF team are discussing policy measures and structural reforms, proposing an economic program aimed at addressing the economic challenges facing the country. We simply have not reached any agreement with the fund on the parameters of any debt operation, as we are in the process of completing the debt sustainability analysis. Government shall continue to actively engage all stakeholders in a clear and transparent manner as we seek to fast-track the IMF negotiation process. Ghana needs a viable domestic financial system to support its development program, especially in these 3 years with limited access to international capital markets. Therefore, everything must and will be done to protect our financial sector, and there must be room for a win-win conversation through extensive stakeholder engagement with both our domestic and external investors. Ghana has always had a collaborative approach with its partners, and we shall, I'm confident, come out of an historic arrangement. I think the issue of the timing is that, we've seen countries like Zambia, rightly you have mentioned, gone through a 2-year negotiation by getting into the common framework. And really, I don't think we as a country can afford that type of uncertainty over that period. And why are we hopeful that will be different? Because in the discussions that I had with the managing director of the IMF, those were the specific issues that we talked about, how to fast track this so that we will get into organizing ourselves a lot better. But more importantly was the meeting between His Excellency the President and the Managing Director of the IMF in Rotterdam. And it was very, very clear in terms of the commitment that the fund showed. And she did say that they were determined to reach an agreement by end of the year, and that they've started constructive discussions with us. The team is here, and they are here on a mission, but as the mission chief told us, this is not a mission of 10 days. It is a mission through the end of the year. So there's increased intensity and acknowledgement that this must be done.
So that was the Finance Minister, Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta, explaining what the government's position is on these negotiations and giving some updates on progress that has been made. So let's come in and try and make sense of all that the government is trying to do with the economy and this IMF negotiations and his clarification of the debt sustainability analysis and what it means. And to help me do that this morning, I'll be doing this with Dr. Thea Champo, economist. Dr. Champo, good morning.
Good morning, my brother, Godfred.
Thank you for joining us as well. Richard Ahiagba is Director of Communications of the NPP. He's in studio with me. Richard, good morning.
Morning to you. Quite well.
Well, good to see you. Looking
Same here.
good.
Yeah, I'm okay.
And Dr. Richard Etiahin, he's a banking analyst. Dr. Etiahin, good morning. Dr. Etiahin, good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Godfred.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, sir.
I can hear you clearly, Senior Etiahin. And then Franklin Kujo is president of Imani Africa. Franklin, morning.
Good morning. Good morning to my good friends on the show.
Thank you for joining us as always, Franklin. I guess I will start the conversation from you, Franklin, this morning. And last week we had heard quite a bit. Some people were not happy with how the news of the potential restructuring of local currency debt was announced. There was a lot of communication about that. And then later we're told the IMF was arriving on Monday to begin formal engagements. The market also did respond in certain ways to some of these pieces of information. Then on Wednesday, we heard from the finance minister. Putting all those together and hearing the finance minister on Wednesday, what did you glean from the strategy he has to try and save what is obviously a very desperate situation?
Well, first of all, I think it was good he spoke because everybody was expecting him to say something, especially when what appeared to be a leak of what exactly government is thinking in terms of the debt sustainability approaches.
You think it was a leak?
Well, don't forget the finance minister himself said they are still in, those conversations are still going to be had. Maybe I'm using the word pejoratively as a leak. We all knew that once we were in the IMF program, one of the first things that ought to be done would be the opportunity to examine your debt portfolio. So either way, your debt sustainability analysis was going to happen anyway. The question was when and at what time. I think when I mentioned the word leak, possibly is to suggest that government itself wasn't particularly sure, even as of now, or as of the time the finance minister was going to speak, as to what structure or nature the debt sustainability analysis should take. But then, of course, he count matters by saying that, well, they are in talks with the IMF, and the IMF is in town, and so this will be done. I think one of the questions you should be asking is exactly when did that conversation about the debt restructuring ought to have started? And I suspect that if you let the likes of Dr. Tuaini and Dr. Tio give you a further insights into how these things work, maybe they are going to tell you that, well, maybe we should have been doing our own work even before the IMF came to town. I'm sure the finance ministry must have had some thinking around it, but as to whether the direct approach to take is what I suspect must have been catching everybody possibly unawares. Because as we did in that short paper we published, well, it's not really short, we were essentially saying that we thinking that the government possibly has about 4 options. They may want to prolong issues, prolong the sustainability analysis, and then suggest that, well, maybe if the IMF deal comes into fruition, which is about 3 billion, then the conversations about the debt sustainability restructuring, or if you like, would have been kicked further down the ladder. But like it or not, it was going to come anyway. The second point we were thinking about was whether to restructure only the domestic debt, that is debt owed only to Ghanaians, or debt owed to our foreign counterpart, those who essentially buy our Eurobonds, which we use for various loans for our various projects, or maybe both. Or we also thought that the government may want to establish what has become in vogue, called the creditor committee, and possibly bring all the creditors into one room, more or less, and engage as to how they either take a haircut, as has been described, or maybe elongate the maturity of these bonds. Or maybe just have decide that they may need legal support, as in using Parliament as a basis for the contractual negotiations with all the bondholders or those who indeed buy our securities. Either way, I mean, in any of these 4 circumstances, I think the conversation must be had with the Ghanaian, because, as we know, we haven't really recovered from the banking, if you like, structural issues that this government decided to invest its time and energy and money into. And so if people have the slightest indication that there's going to be some restructuring that may affect their savings in these difficult periods, then clearly people would be spooked. And I think that's what the finance minister essentially did by saying that, well, we are still in talks with the IMF, and those conversations about debt restructuring or sustainability analysis will kick in anyway. The question is when and how.
Let me ask you this also. Something that should have made you happy, the finance minister's announcement that they are going to make attempts to get complete buy-in on these policies before they move forward with it. I think they've set up a 5-member committee also to talk to several parties, and by parties I mean CSOs, citizens, industry, basically all areas of national discourse. That should have been interesting for you.
Well, by way of approach, this government, especially the finance ministry, likes to do what I call dicing up the conversations or consultations, unlike the previous government that might have done a century type of conversation. So you don't really get a sense that almost everybody they are talking to is in either agreement or disagreement over whatever structures or interventions the government wants to undertake. Ordinarily, yes, they may then have to publish a paper that suggests that, well, these are the conclusions everybody they talk to somehow arrived at. That has to be done, but there's a question of time. If the finance minister's 2 months, if I heard him correctly, that we might likely have a program by the end of the year, Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I heard that. That is very, very optimistic. And it would have meant that all these nagging issues that we are discussing now would have been dealt with. Yes, the finance minister met with a section of the civil society actors at some point. And as I indicated at that meeting, I wasn't particularly so keen on seeing, of course, I didn't see anything particularly new, as in the strategies that ought to be adopted in order to get it out of the hole. I don't know what else the what's it called, the Christian community that I'm sure the finance minister likes to engage would have said to him. I don't know what labor unions would have said to him. I don't know what other non-government actors would have said to him. So until we see that comprehensive paper publishing basically what exactly has been the consensus, I can only say that these interventions and the consultations and the results would typically be in the heads of the finance minister. But he's upbeat about it. And I think that hope is a very rare commodity in this part of our world these days. But we shouldn't hope against hope, because that would be really dire. I normally would say that there must be some optimism against the hope, otherwise it will be baseless. So I'm hoping that the finance ministers, own convictions that the conversations with the IMF will go very well, given the very intractable issues would have been dealt with within the time that he has in order to get a good program from the fund.
Thank you. Let me come to Dr. Thea Champon. So quite a bit was said last week, and then quite a bit has happened this week. When you put the two together, looking at including the very significant press briefing given by the finance minister, have the dynamics changed much from last week to this week?
The dynamics haven't changed as much. I think what has happened really is the finance minister stepping in to give a bit of clarity as to the process going forward. Because last week there was a lot of signal or noise within both the international market and then subsequently the local news media as to what the government is likely to do, particularly when it comes to the issue of debt restructuring. And there was the big issue that, the domestic debt may be restructured and people could even possibly be looking at some sort of loss in terms of haircuts. And I do recall some of us making the call to the authorities, particularly the finance minister, to either issue a statement or say something to the public. So for me, I am quite happy that was done, and at least that gives us some sense of clarity in terms of what the government seeks to do with this whole engagement with the IMF and the debt restructuring process going forward. But the fundamental issues, as Franklin rightly pointed out, as to which of the debt do you restructure, when do you restructure, and how do you restructure, those are big questions that go beyond those public statements. Because as we speak, we've got a major crisis of confidence in the economy, and we've got issues with having to address predominantly debt and debt sustainability in that regard. And many a time, the IMF would only lend to you on condition of restructuring your debt. And that even happens before any formal engagement or arrangement actually is done. So the Zambia one is a very good case study where they spent literally about a year and a half, 2 years back and forth in terms of how to restructure their external debt. And eventually in August, something was agreed between the different, the creditor committee that had been set up, and that then allowed the IMF to formally announce the program with them. So those are the mechanics, right, that would really, we'll be looking out for in the next, for me, couple of weeks, particularly in the lead up to the next month when the 2023 budget would be read, because we have major issues with the debt. And as we speak, I can give some more detail on how this would actually play out in terms of the external debt and the domestic debt, and particularly for domestic, if we're not careful, what that could do for the financial sector. Because as you probably may be aware, the domestic or the Ghanaian banks, right, the commercial banks have about 30% of their assets in the domestic sovereign debt. So this is as of March of 2022. Roughly, that's about 57 billion or $5.5 billion. And if you break that further down, 6 of the country's top 10 banks, and I'm not going to name them on your program,
Certainly.
have government securities. Their exposure exceeds over 40%, right? So this then means that you're going to have a very the vulnerability to incidents of sovereign financial distress actually would increase. And if you are talking just about 10% or so haircut, right, then we have to write off about 5.7 billion. 10% of 57 or so billion is 5.7 billion. If you equate this to the tier 1 capital of many of the banks, that 10% haircut or your 5.7 billion is going to be equivalent to about 30% of the total tier 1 capital of the banking sector, as well as about 10% of the total loans that would be outstanding as of June. So these are major issues that we have to contend with. But we can come to some of the nitty-gritty details as the conversation evolves.
Yes, we will come to that. But when we hear words like fast-track negotiations, but then we are still in the process of completing debt sustainability analysis for a country that is where we are. Technically, should we not have completed that process by now?
So there are two things we have done, or Ghana as a country and the guys at the finance ministry would have done their own DSA. So we do this as part of the budget cycle anyway. And when the IMF also comes into town, they also do their own debt sustainability analysis. And then both sides would actually sit down and pretty much, agree on the numbers, the debt schedule, how much of that would potentially have to be reprofiled, etc. So I think we're going to the conversation with a sense of where we are as a country in terms of the debt numbers. That's one. The IMF also being in town would be doing their own debt sustainability analysis, and then there would have to be some reconciliation. But beyond that, the most important thing is how to bring your creditors together to restructure the debt. That is what could potentially actually extend the duration of the engagement exercise, and that then means that the December timelines that we're looking at to conclude the IMF deal may actually slip a little bit, because if you have some of your foreign creditors, the people we owe in like Eurobonds, deciding that they are going to trigger a number of the collective action clauses, or they decide that they're going to actually prolong the process just because they are not sure that everyone will be treated evenly, right, in the process. And this is what happened in Zambia, where the concern was that if we give, or if the bilaterals give a discount, that inadvertently would be used to more or less subsidize the commercial creditors in that respect. And that delayed, right, the process for much longer. So from where I sit, we're in October now. We've got November and December. That's barely 3 months to conclude all of this. And given past experience, I struggle to see how we would conclude the debt sustainability analysis and then sit down with the creditors to agree on some sort of debt restructuring package. And then eventually then that goes to the IMF board for approval and the program itself, signed off. So I think we're looking probably at about a 6-month, time period, in which case possibly it could go into the first quarter of next year.
Can the government afford that kind of time?
I think the government can. What it needs to do is the signaling, right? So the important thing now, or the key indicator to look out for, in my view, would be the 2023 budget. What would be read in mid-November? That would really tell us what the government plans to do for the next fiscal year in terms of revenue, in terms of expenses, and what they have even done the previous year with the budget numbers. That is the most important signal with what to expect going forward. But the conversation and the discussion itself with the fund, I think that would take a little bit of time, especially if you're looking at doing a comprehensive debt restructuring that encompasses both your domestic debt and the external debt.
All right, Theo, thank you for those ones. Let me talk to Dr. Richmond Tiahine, and then I'll come in studio and talk to Richard. Dr. Tiahine, Theo talks about confidence, and you are in the banking sector. Looking at, is the banking sector feeling confident? I know last week we heard from the Ghana Association of Bankers who were saying, you know, they hope the government does this well to protect the progress that has been made in the banking and financial space. What are you reading from that side ahead of these conversations?
First, let me thank Frank for the work he has done. He's done an extremely good work, and I've read through it, and it's a fantastic work. Frank, so congrats. You've done very, very well. I read it yesterday, and I really, really enjoyed it. You've done almost the whole job for the country. Dr. Jambo has said what is supposed to be said. The banks cannot be confident, because if you do look at the analysis that Frank, as Dr. Jambo has done, tier 1 capital of the 6 banks can be wiped out if it's not done properly. I believe the confidence is not there, because if you listen to I spoke to the president and the president of the association, and I think they are not very confident that all will be well with them. So for me, to start with, like Frank said, there is a need for a serious consensus building, which should have started maybe in June, because I'm sure that the finance minister knew that we have reached a state that he have to go to IMF. So the system should have, the process to me should have begun maybe earlier, so that there could be this dialogue about what is in the debt, what is not in the debt. If you look at the IMF sustainability program, as Frank has done a detailed work, they come in and include even SOEs. They will come in and include the energy debt. And they will come in and even conclude the suppliers' credit debt. People they have done a job for the nation which they haven't been paid. So if you look at the whole brand of it, and you're going to say that, and don't forget, when you talk about the suppliers' credit, it would affect the banks. So even if you take a haircut on the suppliers, it's going to affect the banks, because it's the bank that in rather has supported these people. So I believe that the confidence is not there. Although he spoke yesterday, and I will call it, that is a generic speaking. He spoke generally about it. As we begin the course, then we need always to interact very well. As I've already said, confidence must come out, transparency must be there, so that the banks, which have suffered about 3 years ago, suffer this crisis, will not go into the same crisis. But if you listen to Dr. Jampo, if we take some options, if some options are adopted, then we're going to have a serious crisis, which will be worse than what we experienced in 2015, 2017, 2019. So I believe that everybody, and also those that the bank that should possibly get people who have an idea and do this simple scenario option. This is going to hit you. If you take that option, the five-man appointed committee, then they will have a good discussions, so that the discussions will come out clear. And when the report is published, everybody will know that we have come to a consensus, so that it will not affect the confidence of the banking sector. Because we cannot have everybody talks about the Zambia. Zambia, they decided to do the external debt, but ours looks like we'll be tilting more or not closer to the domestic debt, because the domestic debt will be very difficult to restructure or whatever, reschedule, whatever term you do, debt reduction or debt reschedule. So I believe that in order for us to have confidence, the people who are going to be spoken to must understand the iniquity, the details of what is all on the table. Because what's on the table is not going to be easy for the banks. If you are heard Amani saying it, Amani has written a good paper, I have read it. If you do the haircut, and Dr. Champon has just said it, the capital is going to go off. And who would like to bring in more capital when it is not a fault of their own? Maybe my only suggestion is that they should look at Bank of Ghana. If it's well resourced, they may decide to do what the British people have done, buy the government gate out, so that you release the banks from all these headache. I mean, that is my suggestion, that if we think it's going to hit us hard, we should be looking at what the governor of the Central Bank of England did 3 days ago. He saw what was happening in the market. He decided to buy the long-term gilts and the bonds to stabilize the market. These are good options that we should look at it, because if you go detail like what Frank has done, the work, you haven't even talked about applying the IFRS. IFRS 9 is a very serious application.
Well, what is that?
If you go into it, I'm sorry, we're going to have a terrible banking industry. It's not something you can write home about. So for the time being, I think the confidence is not there, because the uncertainties are there. People are not sure where we are going. How are we going to go there? How are we going to arrive there? What methodology are we going to use? So I think increasingly the people should engage seriously with the financial sector, including the pensions. Because yesterday I heard the Director General of Smith saying that there was a negative return because inflation is 33%. Whatever investment you did, you are negative. So it's going to affect the pension. So if you decide to go and do a haircut on some of the the investment they are holding, then we are in a serious problem. So for the time being, that is what I will say about the confidence. The confidence is not there. We need to seriously be very transparent. I would always say consensus building and transparency, not just talking to just few people and say that. Frank said something that, how did they do it? Nobody knows the methodology used. Fine. But if this is something is going to affect the whole economy, including the banking sector, they must sit up and be seriously talking and engaging people who really understand these ramifications, because they have a serious effect both on the economy and in the financial sector. That is what I will say for the time being.
But let me ask you this. Listening to all of you, it does not look like there is an easy decision to be made either way, whether domestic, whether external. Someone is going to get affected either way if the government is to move at the speed that it wants to move at with these negotiations. Compromises will have to be made. And for some watchers, they have suggested, looking at the kind of control, for instance, that the government holds on the financial sector, a certain element of force to push these through.
Godfred, thank you very much. If you're going to use the force, then you better say you're running the banking sector. Then you can do what we call the financial repression. If you do the financial repression, you let your banks, like the state banks, take over those debt. Take over all those debt. So that when they take over, they don't get interest, they don't get anything, they don't capitalize. So if you have to do the financial repression. And the financial repression, you create the state institutions to take over from those other banks. Because I'm sure the equity holders of these banks, especially the foreign banks, won't be very happy if you want to apply force. There's nothing like applying force in it. There should never be. Because when they were going to acquire these assets, nobody, not from the finance ministry or Bank of Ghana, was able to tell them the risk even associated. And unfortunately, our banks also did not rate it. They thought it was a free, a lazy banking approach. So they went in. So now they are torn between the devil and Satan, which they don't have any reason. But what I want to assure them, government should not apply force. We should not apply force. It must be a transparent discussion. In other countries like Barbados and other countries which they have done these things, they just have to jojo with them and let people do, because Ghana government is not controlling the banks in Ghana. Don't forget, the foreign banks are holding more than the local banks. So we have to be very careful in the words we use about force. No, we can't use force in banking at all. Let us sit down with them. And what Dr. Champon said, which I agree with you, I look at the time frame. You haven't even started gathering your data. You haven't even accepted a debt sustainability before to decide whether it's a debt reduction or debt rescheduling, which involves some cost. Then you begin to think that I want to complete this issue by November. I don't know what they have, I don't have. I don't know which information they hold, I don't hold. I think it's too aggressive, and it's too, we are not allowing the transparency issue to come in. We should take our time. A minimum of 6 months will be very good. Other countries have done it for 6 months. I know a country that has done it for 2 years. So we should not put time frames as if we set a time. We are not. We have created a problem. So we should not think that because we have created a problem, people should accept our, no, it's not done anywhere. Let us have a considerable time, do a detailed work, a comprehensive work, so that when you present it, everybody knows this is everybody owns project, not somebody sitting down there. So for me, the timing is very critical. 3 months is too for me too aggressive. I don't know what, and I haven't seen any country. I've heard about from 1980, I've read up to 2021. I've never seen anybody who has done it in 3 months. No, maybe I don't know what they have, we don't have, what Frank don't have, what Dr. Champon don't have. Maybe they have something in their sleeves. But in that sleeve, if they have it on the sleeves, they have to bring it forward for us all to understand what is it and how we're going to do it and how we arrive there. So that is for the time. That's what I was saying.
Okay. All right then, Dr. Twaini, thank you. Let me come in then and talk to Richard, who's Director of Communications for the NPP. And Richard, it's been a hard couple of years for the party, your party that is in government, and have made a big deal about managing the economy. As we speak, the economy does not look like it is well managed. That is why we are having engagements with the IMF. And listening to the finance minister this week, he sounded confident in knowing what his plan is. But there are those who are also saying, well, maybe he's a bit too optimistic.
Godfred, thank you very much. I was supposed to be at Senyabriku this morning. Today is the final funeral rites of our former chairman, Haruna Iseku. So this morning is a very reflective morning for me. A legend of our party goes home today. But Godfred, I was listening to your previous speakers. I wonder why we're jumping ahead of ourselves, right? Everything said is speculative, and you know speculation is an investment mechanism where we can use to trip the market one way or the other. And unfortunately for me, I'm wondering why is it that we Ghanaians are the ones speculating about the welfare of our economy, being overly pessimistic. And there isn't any element of hope in everything they said. I mean, it's like we're giving up. We're too ready to have an analysis of debt, haircut, and things of that nature. People talking about banks, tier one capital evaporating, which essentially is that you're going to collapse banks. I just don't understand when there is no evidence for that conversation, really. And before I speak a bit about that. The finance minister was clear in his presentation, but you did mention something which I disagree with very forcefully, that the appearance of the economy, or because we had to go to IMF, suggests that the economy has been mismanaged. It's not true, not even in the remotest sense, because you are aware, looking at the economic numbers from 2017 up to now, looking at the growth polls of the government from 2017, 2018, 2019, not just in the macro level, but look at sector by sector, the growth that you register in agriculture, in service, in industry, reflect that the economy was coming around. And so where you begin to see a downturn is a point where we all know where this thing happens. Between 2019, end of 2019, 2020, we started battling with this COVID situation. It worries me sometimes in making honest analysis to gloss over that, because the GDP or the general economic performance in 2017 cannot be discounted. It is not a fiction, it's real. In 2018, it's not fictional, it's real. In 2019, it's not fictional, it's real. The primary balances that have been posted, which suggest to you that government was living within its means.
It was?
Yes, I mean, if you post a primary balance, suppose that you've been able to spend within your means before your interest payments, right? So if you collect more than you spend, okay, for consistently 3 consecutive fiscal cycles, it means that you're being prudent. That cannot be said to be mismanagement. And so I think that there's some measure of honesty must be brought to the analysis. Now, where there are issues to be looked at, then we looked at it fair and square at that point to say that, yes, we noticed that from 2020, the economy began to take a nosedive. And then we can have a conversation, whether you agree or disagree, it's COVID, we can have a conversation, why is this? And I'll give you my reason why I think it's COVID. Why is it that we dropped so low, I think, to 0.2% or 0.4% of GDP in 2020, the reason being that economies were shut down across the world. And so if that is the reason, we can go back and forth about the extent to which it should affect us or the extent to which it shouldn't affect us. But I tell you that it affected us and we dropped. And so we can have that conversation. So where we are is by no means, not possibly by any stretch, a function of mismanagement. I think that we need to come to terms with that. Because if we are progressively doing analysis, there must be points we agree and disagree. And I think we should agree, given the numbers, unless you dispute the numbers. But given the numbers, that has not been disputed yet, the economy has not been mismanaged. Now, we are here. And we are not here only by ourselves or as a country in isolation. We're just talking about the Zambia situation, talking about issues across the globe where economies are running deficit. 50-year inflation records have been experienced across the world. So we are at a point where economic challenges across the world is real. Now, what are we doing in our situation to come back? That, for me, is a conversation we must have. So, of course, you know, we have a balance of payment challenges. Then government had to go to the IMF. And we are with the IMF on the basis of our balance of payment support needs that is being negotiated. Is that a function of mismanagement? Clearly no. So we have established that. Now, the conversation Franklin had, I haven't read his paper, I would like to. And then your other two guests, Dr. Tia Champon and is it Dr. Tia?
Yes.
For me, it's speculative conversation. And this thing started before the finance minister's press conference. And I'm worried that
we should only wait for the finance minister to talk before we can figure out what is wrong with the economy?
No, but if we are all at liberty to speak, not to wait for the finance minister, but the question is, what are you speaking to? You must speak to certain set of facts. Do you have that fact?
But the finance minister, hold on, Barrett, we can also not operate under the assumption that the finance minister is the only person with a set of facts to work with. In fact, let me just tell you this. In 2019, Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Boafo, University of Ghana, wrote a paper that predicted in 2019 that in this year, this is where we would be. Was that being speculative? That was 4 years ago.
And then that took account of what?
That took account of everything that we are in.
No, I'm saying that...
It took account the government's behavior when it comes to spending.
Okay. And it took account of COVID?
It took account of everything.
Okay. So, but then if it took account of government spending, in what year do you say?
The government's behavior when it comes to how it spends.
Yeah, so it's expenditure.
We would essentially end up in an IMF program by this year.
Okay, so
Are we not in an IMF program at this time of the year?
No, I think the issue you are even saying is not taking account of the reality.
No, I'm trying to establish for you that there is room for speculation based on educated availability of data. You cannot take that away.
That's fine, but then that should not be presented.
Which is what you're trying to discount.
No. I'm saying that the press conference by the finance minister was very clear to say that there hasn't been any conclusion on any debt sustainability analysis. There's no report to that effect.
That's his to say.
Fine. No. But that
but
is
there are others who can dispute it.
No. See, this is not a question of agree or disagree. It's a question of what is and what is not. Do we have a debt sustainability report on which the IMF is going to act? Do we have that? I want you to answer that. Do we have it?
Well, according to him, no. He says he's still working on it.
So that's the fact. And he only, with the engagement with the IMF, will produce that.
But nobody has said that.
No,
otherwise.
Hold on. I'm saying that all the conversation that has been had this morning is assuming and speculating that a debt sustainability report, subject to the engagement that is going on, will arrive at a situation where government would inevitably have to do some debt restructuring, which in their speculation suggesting that it would mean that banks or investors in Ghana may have to take a haircut.
Question.
But I'm telling you,
no,
let me just conclude.
Hold on, no. We are just having this conversation. This Wednesday, why is the finance minister setting up a committee of 5 to talk to banks, CSOs about the potential of debt restructuring?
No, that's not what he's doing.
What's he doing there?
It's an ongoing consultation, and
to discuss what?
So no, for input. I mean, you have to read the statement. Unless I can read it for you. And he talked about, look, the government is finalizing the post-COVID economic program, which will form the basis for the implementation of the IMF agreement and all of that, right? And so he's saying that even that document that is being prepared now has benefit of input of stakeholders. And he's saying that that consultation process is ongoing. And therefore, the ministry is setting up a 5-member committee to talk to sectors for like banking. They're going to talk to assets. They're going to talk to management. They talk to insurance. And they're going to talk to one other sector, right? So broad consultation to take input from there to continuously beef up the economic program, the post-COVID economic program that is finalizing. Please. You know, to the extent that we're having this conversation, I think I should read that section for you, so you can educate your.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So that is paragraph 25, right?
Yes.
Are you with me?
Yes, please.
It's a 5-member committee consisting of prominent financial service professionals will lead extensive stakeholder engagement across the key segments of the financial sector, i.e., banking, asset management, pensions, and insurance. Okay? The announcement of the committee members will be made in the coming days and will immediately get to work to engage key stakeholders in the financial services sector, additional to the ongoing engagement with civil society organizations, social partners, labor unions, and the rest of that, academia, and all of that. Yes, I mean, but that's what the statement says.
Not buy-in.
I'm saying that is what the statement says. Okay. Are we reading the statement, or we're assuming our own and imputing?
Because he did take questions.
Yes, but then he took questions that contradicted what he said in the statement.
Oh no!
So the point is that we need to move away, and that's why I'm very careful in saying that much of the conversation has been speculative, and then I don't take it away from people who they have certain set of facts they want to speak to. But presently, you cannot speak to those facts you have as though there's a conclusive position from the IMF. The IMF itself was very careful in saying that a debt sustainability report has not been done on their part vis-a-vis government. Government may have done its own debt sustainability report that we have, hold in hand and engage with the IMF. But the IMF has not participated with us, or they themselves have not concluded a DSA report. So their statement suggests that there hasn't been any conclusion, and so therefore there cannot be any talk about restructuring. That they will have to complete that, and if they do, the report will determine whether or not there is any need for restructuring And if there is a need for restructuring, what area it should affect and what it shouldn't affect. So then we are so far away from that conversation to make it a topical discussion.
How are we far away, Richard? You are looking to fast-track negotiations with the IMF in record time. That has basically looking at available evidence for a period that has never happened before. You're basically looking to move at record speed, are we not?
Yeah.
So if you're looking to move at record speed at this, why is there not room for people to look at this and say, okay, based on this available data, this is a potential outcome?
I don't take away that from people, but I'm just saying
That's what you want to do.
No, I don't take away. I'm only telling you that people can have that conversation, but don't have it assuming or creating the impression that there is a report to speak to that is conclusive. There is no such report.
That's a good position to hold.
That's exactly the only position that is available.
No, for you. We'll take a break.
Unless you want to say you have a DSA report.
We'll take a break from the biggest. We'll return. Richard Ahiagba is still on. And then we'll go to a bit more speculative analysis of what could be done to restore Ghana's economy. Welcome back to the big issue. Very spirited conversation with Richard Ahiagba, as it should be, Director of Communications of the NPP, discussing the economy, also with Dr. Richmond, the Tiahin, banking analyst, Stuart Champon, Franklin Kujo. Yes, so Richard.
Yes. So
I'll give you 6 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. So the point I am making is that we need to get to a point where we are going with the process. Now, that doesn't take away from people making their own predictive analysis, but such predictive analysis should account for the lack of definitive position, where we can all speak to when that position becomes available. Then we can speak to that. We can make that allowance, because unless you do that, you create fear and panic in the market.
So you're simply saying we should wait for the things to happen, and then once it happens, we move on from there? Is that what you're saying?
It's like when you went on break, you and I were having a conversation, but that's not on air. So we have to wait till we come on air to continue the conversation we're having before you went on break.
But no economy functions like that, Richard.
No, I'm just saying that's
no
what
market functions like that.
No, it does. It should. The only way it doesn't function like that is that people outside seeking to benefit would be speculating for their own investment interest. So I'm just saying to you that if you and I want to have that conversation, we have to speak to data, right? We have to speak to a report. Is that report available? For which reason you can say that this bank A or this debt here is going to be restructured? It's not available.
Large elements of that data is available.
Hold on.
Ghana's debt is not magic. The numbers are there. As to how to restructure it, several people have done it before. But it can be done.
But listen, but then there is no position
it cannot be only Kenneth Oyata who knows how to work out how to restructure Ghana's debt.
See, you are
that is the point you are making.
No, I'm not making that point.
That if the finance minister has not put this out, nobody else has that set of data, so nobody should talk about it.
No, Godfred.
That's what you're saying.
No, don't misunderstand me so grossly. What I'm trying to tell you is this: that for Franklin, for Dr. Tiahene and Dr. Tua Champon to say and do the analysis in definitive ways, to say that yes, we are going for a restructure or not, there must be a report that says that between the IMF and Ghana, the team that is negotiating this deal, sitting to do a DSA, the conclusion suggests that Ghana will have to do a restructure. And that report will stipulate where and how this will be carried out. There is no such report to speak to. So if you are making any analysis on the matter, you must account for the absence of that report. Okay? So if I am listening to you, the absence of that report makes me take what you are saying with a pinch of salt, because there is no conclusive position with which to advance. It doesn't stop you from having your conversation. You can. Okay. So that's what I just want us to recognize. And that's what the finance minister, in giving this press conference, underlined for us. And the IMF themselves, their communication director, underlined that for us. So why are we glossing over that? Why are we then jumping to the point and say that we have reached a point where, in our minds, there's a DSA report that says that conclusively there's going to be a debt restructure? There is nothing like that.
Okay.
So let's speak to the facts of the matter. Then going forward, then we can know where these things are. Otherwise, we are creating unnecessary fear in the market. The analysis that they are making is fine, but let's make sure that it is contextualized so people understand that this is not a conclusive position. It's our stipulation or our expectation or our analysis looking into the future to say that if this position became available, this outcome is likely. If you agree with what I'm trying to say. So that for me is, you should agree, not just hear me. So generally, Godfred, I say that I choose to be optimistic because of the track record of the government in managing the affairs of this country. You and I were having a conversation off air. That's later on. If you want to bring it, we can have it. But the point of it is that I disagree very forcefully, looking at how from 2017, and you can look at the numbers and they speak for themselves, to say that this government is able to bring the economy back from where it was in 2016, is capable of trying to dig us out of this. But the only thing is that we must engage honestly. As Ghanaians, we must look and realize that we have a responsibility, and this particular moment, the key responsibility we have, Godfred, is to save ourselves from being excessively pessimistic and become too speculative as to worsen our own case. That is a real problem, you know. And I want to tell you, Godfred, with all the emotion I can muster, to say that we must speak against this scourge of speculation that is going, because it has real cost. It has real cost. It does. It does. I mean,
Ghana is the only economy where people speculate about its economy.
No, I'm just saying.
Only country.
I'm not saying. Speculation is part of investment, right? It's an investment.
So
tool.
what is your problem?
So what
with
I'm saying is that we ourselves speculating so much about our economy when we don't have the facts. That for me is the problematic.
But should that not be a problem where I keep hearing this thread of Ghanaians are speculating against their own economy? They don't have the facts. Who has the facts?
It depends. What fact are you talking about?
Exactly. It's the same question I'm asking you, because it does look like nobody else seems to have the facts.
Well,
according to
wait. So in
the government.
Yes. No, it's not according to the government.
But you're the only ones who keep saying that we are speculating against our own economy. Nobody else says it.
But you see, the point is, it's a factual thing, and the difficulty is that people don't want to appreciate. I just went through a conversation with you where you agreed that you cannot begin to speak in clear terms today as though there's a DSA report, because there is none. That is the fact people are talking about. It's not like you don't know what Ghana's debt is. You know that. Okay? It's as if you don't know. You know that. But what you don't know, what I don't know, that is yet to come out. It's a DSA report.
Let me ask you a question.
So until that comes, you cannot begin to say that any bank, anybody is going to get a haircut. You can't say that.
Let me ask you a question. Looking at the data you have in front of you and this engagement that Ghana is having with the IMF, I might ask you to do a bit of speculation with my question.
No, I'm not qualified to do that.
We will see whether you're qualified or not. But my question, is there any way Ghana engages the IMF successfully without debt restructuring?
You see, I told you I'm not qualified to do that because my politics is not aligned with speculation. I'm saying that I want to speak to fact. When the IMF and the government's outcome, the DSA outcome, shows that this is what we have concluded and this is what is going to be the steps necessary to reach a deal, then we can speak to that. But until
are there people who are qualified?
Nobody is qualified at this point.
The finance minister himself is not qualified?
Yes, because there's an engagement ongoing about the debts report. Okay. Once that DSA comes, unless it comes, nobody is qualified to speculate. We are all not qualified at this point.
Let me talk to two of my unqualified people.
I think they are most unqualified.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm surprised our good brother Richard actually going this particular direction, because look, we deal with these numbers. The debt report of Ghana, from the Bank of Ghana, from even the Ministry of Finance itself, you know that every year they do an annual public debt report, very comprehensive report. The last one that was done for last year of December is actually available on the Ministry of Finance's website, and the other similar reports are there. So I get a bit, worried when Richard starts using words like we're being speculative and pessimistic and things like that. No, we're actually speaking to the fact. And besides, you might ask yourself, now who caused some, right? In everyday balance, in that regard. The fact is, the IMF only would lend to you if you can repay that money back and take some sort of adjustment programs in the process. This is
that is not speculation.
That's not speculation. It's on the IMF's own website. It's there. The condition for lending is to take or make sure that your debt is sustainable. And clearly, where we are as a country at 78%, debt to GDP, at a point where you cannot even go and borrow from the external market. The finance minister himself just in the statement said that until the next 3 years, they cannot go and borrow, or sell any Eurobonds. And in that regard, you have to then resort to raising money from the domestic market. And in the 2022 budget, the government said that they were going to raise as much as 75% of their financing from, within the domestic market, which then has other cascading effects on the crowding out of the private sector and even on the liquidity positions of many of those banks. So this is not speculation. This is based on hardcore fact, hardcore evidence. And I don't think any of us here has actually said that the debt sustainability analysis report of the IMF is out. I don't think anybody has said that. The last DSA that the bank did as part of Ghana's Article 4 consultation, that's available. That's for last year. And you've got the public debt report. You've got information from Bank of Ghana. You can add all of these slice and dice. And the point is that there is no way Ghana would have a program with the fund if it doesn't address the issues of its debt and putting that on a sustainable footing going forward. So I'm just really, honestly, a bit surprised that Richard is trying to, put words in some of our mouths when the thing actually isn't there, because the data speaks for itself. Second point, he talks about the economy being on a good footing. And interestingly, he cherry picks some numbers, to make that point about the primary balance and things like that. You have to look at this on a much more comprehensive basis. There are other indicators you can look at going as far back as 2019 and coming into 2020, 2021. That clearly shows you that we were not on a sustainable path, particularly when it comes to our debt. And this is there. The data speaks for itself. And let me give you one analogy, and I said this earlier during the week. They said that during COVID, the people who died the most, were those that had those underlying ailments, those that had hypertension, diabetes, and things like that. Is that fact or not? And if that is fact, what really all these COVID things we're talking about and Russia, Ukraine, is just expose our own fiscal diabetes or fiscal hypertension. That is the reality we have to deal with. And that is not speculation and making it look as though those of us who comment on these issues are any less patriotic than those who are making the decisions for and on behalf of us. We seriously have to question some of those motives that are being imputed.
Richard says he wants to ask a question. Richard.
Dr. Champon, just a quick question. I didn't cherry pick. I used what was available between 2017 and 2019, the economic indicators, the performance of the economy altogether, right? All the macroeconomic indicators was what I was referring to between 2017 and 2019. Now, you focused on 2020, 2021 to date. Do you discount at any point that COVID actually impacted, and do you disagree that from 2017 to 2019, this economy was doing well?
No. You're completely misreading me. 2017, 2018 to about 2019, the numbers were looking relatively good. Nobody discounts that.
So that was the numbers I used.
Then you ask yourself, that was the time that we were still under an IMF program. Immediately that we actually completed that program, and remember we have to even extend the IMF program by another year because a number of those structural benchmarks and indicators were not met. And as at the time we were even exiting, those issues were still there, including the way we run the public finances or the GIFME system and some things not being captured. our state-owned enterprises and all of these things. So you didn't need to be a magician or rocket scientist to actually be able to look into the numbers or look into it and be able to tell that even with or without COVID, we could have gotten to a point where there would have been some of these balance of payment challenges that we're having now,
wow,
and eventually having to go to the IMF to be able to, enter a program and restructure the economy. That is that. COVID did have an impact, no two ways. COVID and even Russia, Ukraine, you could argue, but that affected every economy everywhere in the world. So how come it is only Ghana that is, complaining and making it look as though we're the ones who have been heavily impacted than others? That is not the case, because you have a fundamental problem with the way we run this economy. And what the pandemic and what this current world has done is really expose what I call our fiscal diabetes. That is what we should address.
I have a couple. Let's try and make progress on, again, what portends for us as we try and navigate this IMF program. So the IMF's FAQs this week from the 25th September, I'm sure you've seen those FAQs, spoke about what type of program, duration. Again, it looks like S3 plus 1 and whatnot. Did the FAQs clear up anything for you? Did they give you any more information that you did not have?
The FAQs added a bit more clarity, but most of the information in terms of what the process would look like, particularly when it comes to the debt sustainability analysis by the IMF, which we're all looking for, those things would come down the line. But let me just reiterate what I said much earlier, that the government of Ghana has done its own DSA, and this is part of the annual budgets, and the Ministry of Finance does this on a regular basis. The challenge sometimes had been that other elements of the debt were not included in some of these DSAs. So, for example, the off-balance sheet lending or the exposure of some of your state-owned enterprises and things like that. And it is those things that the IMF currently, in their conversations with the Ghanaian government, will be looking for further details on to arrive at a comprehensive position in terms of the total exposure of the central government when it comes to its debt. And then that then leads us to a broader conversation as to, okay, if we know the total public debt, and you break that down into how much is external and how much is domestic, and who is owed what in the process, then there must be then some sort of conversation, or there could be some conversation as to how then you restructure that debt. And that can take many forms. So it's not just haircuts. It can take even the reprofiling or asking for an extension to the payment of like the interest, right? So you delay payment of interest or delay even the principal. And I have argued that we need to start off with the external debt, because we can actually go under the G20 common framework and bring all the creditors together around the table to find some sort of way forward in that regard. And then the domestic debt, that's a different kettle of fish that we need to deal with. But these things are there. Some of the numbers are there from the Bank of Ghana, Ministry of Finance, etc. We still await what the DSA of the World Bank, of the IMF would be, and then that then forms the basis for the negotiations going forward.
The currency has also been a significant issue, although there is some level of hope that there is some money coming in between now and December. If I'm not mistaken, I think 750 or 800 million. Yes, is coming in to try and at least stabilize the slide of the Citi, at least between now and the end of the year. How, at least in the short term, how significant is this in helping us out?
I think we already have had 750 or so million coming in from the Afri-Exim facility.
Oh, okay.
And then this month we're waiting for the 1.3 billion or so cocoa syndicated loans to us come through. In fact, if you look at the data points since the Afro-Exim facility kicked in, the CD has somewhat stabilized a little bit. So it's not losing as much ground as we saw a couple of months or a couple of weeks ago. So the signaling effect has been a little bit positive. But of course, it's only a temporary fix, right, in that regard, because we're going up into the key Christmas period where people are importing their goods and services and they'll be selling in that regard. So you still need some more liquidity within the market, and you need more dollars to be able to meet those importations when it comes to that. So I think the cocoa money coming in would help to an extent. And then what the government actually says in the 2023 budget that will be read in about probably a month and a half's time would also be very important signaling for us going forward.
Theo, just to wrap this up with you, let me ask you one question. What would be considered a decisive move from the government in trying to get the economy back on track? I'm not looking at just the IMF engagements. Taxes. I think recently we've seen the GRA, for instance, on the streets. They are chasing everybody for their money. So taxes, commodities, what would be a decisive move in your estimation?
I think there are several decisive moves, because there are a lot of complex factors that we need to take into account.
Highlight three for me, if you can.
Look at it purely from a budget point of view, right, in terms of revenues and expenditures. Then the two things in there would be, how do we increase the revenue base from the tax base, rather, from the current 13-14% of output as measured by GDP to about 17-18% in the medium term, and which sector can go tackling the rot at the port, some of the leakages that we're seeing. All of those things could be looked at, and even the exposure of a number of our state-owned enterprises. Then on the expenditure side of the equation would be how to restructure a number of the cost items that we have in the budget, including what some of us call fiscal, quote unquote, rigidities. So payment, interest servicing, and then payment to things like the district assemblies, common fund, get fund. All those things would have to be considered as part of the comprehensive mix. But ultimately, we need to grow the economy, and ultimately that growth needs to translate or move down to the real sector where jobs are being created and livelihoods are being enhanced. Other than that, we'll still be talking about these big macroeconomic numbers that sometimes have no bearing to people within the real sector of the economy.
Thank you, Theo. Franklin.
I wanted to make a response, but
No, I'll come back to you. Okay. Franklin.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think the biggest headache for the government in this whole conversation about the IMF program, and indeed the elephant in the room right now on debt sustainability analysis, however you want to dice it up as Richard may want, it must be the political fallout question. And here I think the government must brace itself to actually deal with the opposition in Parliament. And not just the opposition, because the optics dealing with the opposition in Parliament actually cascades into the larger deals with the Ghanaian citizenry, by the way. All I'm trying to say is that it is important that this whole conversation about debt sustainability is done in such a way, because of the ramifications involved, is done in such a way that there's a political consensus as well. This is not speculation. These are things that are already playing out in the gallery already. And I think the government needs to handle it carefully. I think that the biggest reason why there's a bit of skepticism on behalf of many people when it comes to government alone thinking, like my good friend might want to say, is that previous engagements or previous commitment to some of these things, some of the issues that led to where we are today, have not been done properly. Look at the public financial management systems we have. Up until about 2018, only 34% of the targets we said we were going to meet. Well, of course, only 34% of the targets were met by 2018. Now, if you take a casual look at government's own transactions that go through the controller, in one sample, about 88% of the transactions bypass the give me system. Now, it tells you, in fact, Dr. Theo describes it perfectly. That's fiscal diabetes or hypertension, really. So the structural reasons why we are where we are today in terms of how we manage our finances have to be called into question. And so it makes it very difficult for the sort of consensus we want to build if we do not go far beyond just our own little notes and our own side notes suggesting that, well, this is the way it ought to be. As Theo said, nobody has been definitive to suggest that this is the approach to be taken. I think scenarios have been given, and in any civilized economy, everybody has a way of doing conducting their own scenarios anyway. So I think we need to take these conversations very, very, very seriously and not deflect them as political opposition, as my good friend Richard may want to suggest a thought. So I think we need to be a little bit more cautious, but these are serious conversations on the table. I think by way of course, what should be done in the economy, I think time without number, a lot of people have said what should be done. Structurally, everything has to be fixed. I think the biggest problem for our governments have been what I call the shopping list they take to the elections. And I think it's important that next time when someone comes to you with a shopping list saying they want to do A, B, C, D, we need to start together, sift through and find out exactly which ones constitute political sloganeering and those that are serious returns in terms of business plans. I know you can't run the country just as you run a business, but I would ask myself, where does the politician get the money to run the country? It's people's business, right? It's people's investments. It's people's taxes. So we've got to start having that critical conversation as to what exactly does the Ghana government need in order to prosecute development, and does the Ghanaian government need to do any and every aspect of development? Maybe it's about time we ask ourselves what portion of this burden can be taken by the private sector, so that we don't have an e-levy that suggests that, well, a portion of that e-levy will be taken and given to government to create entrepreneurship or create jobs. But those things are fanciful; they never really work. They are just scams, you know. So. Look, we could go into several directions with this conversation, but I think the fundamental question right now is what level of goodwill, political capital left that the government can use in order to navigate these choppy waters. I think it is very, very important. And so we should stop the name calling and the what I call the political posturing, and then just get to the business of getting everybody on board. I think people have just suggested choices. We are not being definitive, and I think it's allowed in every civilized democracy, really.
All right, thank you, Franklin, for sharing your thoughts on that. Dr. Tuahin, I'll take your final round of comments, and then I'll wrap up this side of the conversation with Richard.
Thank you very much, Godfred. I think the earlier speakers have done a good job. What they have said that we shouldn't take political postures about these things, because this information is there for everybody to read into it. One thing somebody has forgotten is that last year, December, where was the dollar standing? The dollar was about 5 point something. Today we're talking about 37% depreciation. It's not a political statement. I don't think my earlier speakers, Dr. Champon and Franklin, have said that. Because you don't have access to continue to borrow money to show the currency is finding its own level. Because you borrow and you don't go into productive investment, that is why the currency is finding its own level. This is not a political statement. I have written a paper, Ghana on Sustainable Debt, recently, published it. And it tells about why we are where we are today. We borrow for consumption. You can't borrow for consumption, especially for the capital market. If you're borrowing from the multilateral, you can possibly look at it. You don't borrow and don't go and give greenhouse farming $50 million in 2018, which is a political. I saw the paper. The paper was in front of me. Approved. 50 million for greenhouse farming, 50 million for integrated e-learning. 50 million cedis, not dollars. How do you pay that money from Euro money? This is not a political statement. Please, I plead with you all that people should stop calling us names. We are people who have sat down, look at it, analyze it, compare, do a comparative studies, which Dr. Champon has done, which Franklin has done a very good job. I read his job yesterday, and I was saying that if I were him, I would possibly send the data to you people, because he's done a comprehensive data. All that Franklin is saying that you must cut your coat according to your cloth. But unfortunately, as we politicize everything, this is person, this we don't belong to any party. They are academians and researchers. Let me make it clear to those who are listening to us. We are not speculating to benefit from it. We have not benefited from anything. I have not benefited anything since. So I don't know why people will call me to benefit from it. Please, let us tackle the issue on the table. And let the academia, the researchers, and those who have information help us to come together and solve this problem. Because this problem is a big, big problem. You may think that decision has not been taken. We have read about Sri Lanka. We have read about Zambia. We have read so many things. So if people say that we are concocting stories and calling us names, please, let us not do that. It is based on us. When I made a suggestion on Monday that we should build a consensus building with people who are competent, who are expertise to understand that. It's for no reason why it was captured. Could you say that was a speculation? No. We are saying that bring people together. Let us look at the facts on ground, and let us find solution to it. Nobody is saying that the IMF are taking a stance on the debt, whether it's restructuring or rescheduling or debt reduction. But it is a prelude to what we anticipate. So if we can have people like Dr. Champon, my friend Franklin, talking about it, I think Ghanaians should rather say kudos. You people have done well. Because not in all jurisdictions you get people like Franklin and Dr. Champon to speak on issues like that. Ghana GDP, you people were saying 78. Go and see the site. It's not more than, it's more than that. People say COVID. Nigeria GDP is 23% of the debt GDP. Did they not have COVID? More people died in Nigeria than they died in Ghana. What that we want to say is that don't say that, continue saying that it is the Ukraine war and this. Are you the only person who are suffering from Ukraine? The Europeans are suffering more. The Germans are suffering more than us. But they don't use that as a basis. They go scientifically, proactively to look at their problem and solve it. And this is what other countries are doing. Let me end here. Yesterday, 3 days ago, something happened in UK. The Chancellor made a sweeping tax cut. Look at how the pound has reacted to it. Look at how people have talked about it. Look at how the academians have spoken about it. Look at how the researchers have talked about it. Now the central bank has decided to go and buy it. So as we talk about it, as we discuss it, it brings knowledge to bear on the economy. We are not politicians. Please, let me make this point. I am not. Franklin is not. I know Dr. Champon is not. We are only researchers who are helping us to shape impending trouble that is going to come. So please, thank you very much. And I hope all Ghanaians will sit down, and when they want to build consensus building, I am urging them to call for people who really understand this issue. Because as we haven't reached there, we'll possibly reach there. Because Sri Lanka has reached there. We will reach there. So we are not speculating. And my colleague speakers know what is happening in Sri Lanka. So please, I'm not agitating for anything. We are not preempting IMF results. We are only discussing the issues as it happens, so that the country can benefit from the expertise and knowledge that the Ghanaians have. I want to thank you. And we still depend, I've said this before, until we stop talking about politicizing names and calling people names, this country won't go. Because anytime some of us speak on issue, oh, he's this man, he's that man. I am no person. Dr. Franklin is no person. He's a human being. A human being who is suffering. I went to Kumasi last week. I spent 2,000 on petrol. Am I a politician? What we are saying, let us see the benefit of the country to the benefit and the welfare of the citizenry, the real economy, rather than politicizing issues. Right. Let us not do that. Other than that, when the researchers and the academian choir, you see the end point of the chemistry will say titration. You see the end of it. And that is where you say that we haven't done much. I want to thank my colleagues, Dr. Champon and Franklin
as well. Thank you very much.
You're debating me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richmond Tuahene, a long-time player in the banking space. Richard, so your final thoughts on this, and then we'll discuss another pertinent issue.
Yeah, Godfred,
that your government is handling.
I listen very closely to Dr. Tuahene.
Yes, please.
And I can't help but believe what I'm saying is right. You see, when you have a conversation that does not account for all the facts, you cannot but insinuate politics. You see, he spoke very well, but then assume that Ghana is in this place by itself, that he spent 2,000 to go to Kumasi, and therefore Ghana is in a place that we have dug ourselves into. That's a global situation. He didn't account for that. Why would he neglect that? It's obvious. Why did he neglect that? It's politics. He may not be a politician, he may not be aligned to any political party, but he is advancing a political outcome by not recognizing the facts. Dr. Teo, when he was talking, he asked
that our currency has depreciated, and so we are spending more to import crude. So
you are looking at that in isolation. You understand? We don't live in a vacuum. We don't live as an isolated country. It's interconnected, global system.
We could have refined oil, right?
So that what you are saying is that what we are suffering, what is the incidental impact from outside the economy? You cannot make any reasonable analysis today in the particular context we're in if you neglect the external impact. It is present, it is even now more important than it's ever been to connect the global to the local.
But
so
then
that's the fact that I'm saying.
No, but then the point then becomes...
Godfred, just allow me to make my point. When they were talking, you were interjecting, and I just want to be clear on that. They make points... Hold on. They make points...
I will interject if I feel I need to
I needed you to interject. Right? That was why I was asking you to ask questions. So you should allow me to flow. Because when you were talking, there were things that you should interject, but you didn't.
No, if I feel...
So those are the things I'm going to raise. Those are the things I have to raise for you now. So allow me to do that. You asked Dr. Teo to give you or prescribe some 3 measures to come out of this.
Yes.
We talked about
increasing the tax
secure the revenue by plugging loopholes.
Increasing the tax base, yes.
Yes. So by plugging loopholes, and it talks about expenditure.
Restructuring cost items. Yes.
That's expenditure, essentially. And then he said, ultimately, we must grow the economy.
Yes.
Isn't that the case? Now the economy is growing. Why can't he reference that? The first quarter, second quarter numbers that came out shows an upswing in the economy. He didn't recognize that. He didn't reference that. He says we must grow the economy. He should be able to say that, yes, where we are, it looks like the economy is growing. But he didn't reference that. So this cherry picking, if people are ignoring all the facts and arriving at a certain conclusion that paints a bad picture, you should be able to underline that and say it is people's politics. Why would you ignore the obvious? That's what they are doing. He said in his, Dr. Teo again, in his discussion, talks about ultimately the DSA that the IMF would reach with Ghana will form the basis for the negotiation. But then they are making commentary as though they have evidence of that. That you cannot ignore politics in that matter. So we're saying that, Godfred, we need to moderate the conversation well. We need to moderate the conversation. We allow certain people to go on a tangent and speak. Dr. Tuahene is talking as if he can speak for Franklin. He can speak for Dr. Teo that my colleagues, they are not politicians. How does he know? They are politics. How is he speaking for Franklin? I don't understand. So he can speak for himself. All right? And I'm saying that if he, Dr. Teo, in making his commentary, ignore that the economy is growing, but then he says that the economy must grow. When the economy is growing, because he says he has all the numbers, he's done all the analysis, he should be able to realize that notwithstanding the difficulty, we have a first quarter and second quarter growth that has been posted. So that means that the economy is growing. So he should be able to acknowledge that the government is doing what it must do to grow. And you see, all of this conversation, really, the reason I'm interested in the Dr. Teo's comment about growth is that is a potential for us to explore.
Growth or development, which one?
Sorry?
Economic growth or economic development, which one?
Growth, just generally, but that leads to development. But I'm talking about the real economic growth that will give you the fiscal space to be able to manage your debts and then be able to come out of the quagmire that you're in. right? And that tells you that people are not paying attention. They are discarding the potential for that. If you look at this government's performance, and I can look at that and tell you from 2017, right? The real sector, you look at agriculture grew by 3.5, okay? In 2018 by 4%, in 2019 by 4.2%, an average 3.9% growth. In this consecutively. There's the industry sector, 11.2% in 2017, 17.6% in 2018, 8.5% in 2019, on average 12.5%. Tells you a potential for us to grow. That exists. We have that is within our control. These are things we control, and we can control that. And the evidence that this government can do it is present in its history. Why do you ignore that in making an analysis? So those kinds of, personal interest-driven political analysis is what we're talking about. And frankly, we know this. Policy advocates can make their conclusions. They make political advocacy analysis that gives you a certain outcome because their politics determines that they make the analysis, skew the numbers to arrive at a certain effect. Frankly, won't discount that. So
no, I don't do that.
No, please. Policy analysis, you can do a policy analysis from a professional standpoint, you can do it from a political standpoint, you can do it from a scientific standpoint. What I see is people doing political analysis of the matter. They can disagree, that's what they are doing, but the evidence
that's
of
how
what
you consume it.
That is what I see them doing.
Okay. Because
they are picking and choosing between the numbers, ignoring, emphasizing where there are obvious challenges to do with COVID. They say, oh, that one we gloss over. Dr. Tia Champon went back and said, yes, I agree COVID had effect, but he's not willing to tell us the extent of that effect. If you say COVID had effect, he did say that. What is the extent of it? And what is the impact of it? Would he accept that impact he accepts COVID is had is equal to the situation we're in? Is he able to tell us? So the point is that we cannot have a conversation like this. And I was careful to show you the record of the government and building on that record to say that this is an individual I'm dealing with. Godfred is capable. Godfred has run this program. So when you say Godfred moderate big show, you don't go there and you micromanage him because you know he has a capacity. He's demonstrated for you that he can run the program. So you put him there and you just do what you have to do to support him. But you have that record. And Franklin and Dr. Tiahene and Dr. Tio are acting as if they are dealing with a government who doesn't have a track record of growing this economy. When the economy was picked up in 2016, they knew the numbers, where the numbers were. So that those numbers had improved from 2017, 2019, 2020. And as we speak, even in this present time, we have posted first quarter, second quarter growth, but nobody is willing to talk about it. All they want to talk about is their political advocacy is to say that everything is bad. And that for me is problematic. That for me is what we are having to contend with.
Godfred,
you understand?
Godfred, I think we need to make a simple statement.
Go on.
No, but I haven't finished, Franklin. So please.
I think Richard,
so I'll let him ask you a question. You asked a question. No, but you asked a question, so I'll let somebody ask you a question.
To be fair. Okay, go ahead.
I'm not taking your time away, so don't worry.
Okay.
Richard, yes. I think you got the notes for the conversation we're going to have this morning. The conversation was not going to be about praises or ill praises of the government. That's not what we're going to have. We're supposed to have a specific conversation about the IMF. Now, we are having a conversation relating to the debt options and all of that. I think that's the notes we got, right? So this accusation of cherry picking and then doing unscientific analysis, please, is quite frankly unfair.
Frankly,
point is made.
Yeah, frankly, you need to get me right. I didn't say you are doing unscientific analysis. I'm saying that those are the options. If I am a policy analyst, I can look at it from a scientific standpoint, from a professional standpoint. All of that, the input that goes into your analysis are different. There's a political analysis that you do of a policy because you want a certain outcome. So you emphasize certain data and de-emphasize others. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not saying you're not doing scientific and choose to do scientific analysis. If you do scientific analysis, Godfred, you will come to a conclusion to say that I'm looking at a trend of a government that took this economy in decline and grew it in 2017 and grew it in 2018 and grew in 2019. And I saw that in 2020, there was an incident of COVID that has impacted that economy. And so I can see the numbers, whilst they were declining in the 3 years preceding, had started to decline. Scientific evidence will tell you that, okay, maybe this had an impact. Dr. Teo agreed. Well, what is the extent of the impact? He hasn't told us. But I'm telling you that the extent of COVID is where we are. So he can give us his own estimation of it.
In your estimation, the weight of COVID has stripped off all the gains. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying
that were made in the 3 years.
If you
and
decide,
we've not recovered.
Godfred, well, we are recovering. I just told you about the growth numbers that we are posting. I just told you about that, right? But Godfred, you create anything, then I'll show you a trend where we are going up and then suddenly decline. So you have to explain to me why we declined.
No, what would be interesting for you to explain would be, because every country will be able to show you that they were going somewhere. COVID came and every country went down. There was no country that went up during the COVID. Every country had a certain level of decline during the COVID.
Very well.
But I'm saying that the strength of that development, or the growth numbers that you have, would indicate how you mitigate the COVID period, would it not?
Mm-hmm. But you see,
3 weeks into COVID, this country was broke.
Yes, Godfred.
3 weeks.
Yes, Godfred.
You mentioned 3 years of growth.
Yes.
Taken away by 3 weeks.
Yes. Godfred.
What kind of growth is that?
Godfred, listen. You know, and offline, you and I were talking about inflation and what factor is driving our inflation. You were saying that, it's demand or supply. You're saying supply. And I'm telling you, it's cost-driven inflation that we're experiencing. Because really, after COVID, what did you see? Cost of living went up. Cost of shipping went up. And much of our economy is dependent on import, right? So you then begin to spend more on cost of items. So if you look at how the measures that is being taken by both the monetary part, where Bank of Ghana is seeking to control inflation by increasing interest rate and all of that to kind of stabilize the economy, you see it's not working. Because why? The real cause of it is cost-driven, which is global in nature.
But isn't that where the accusation then comes in, that there's a significant disconnect between your numbers, in the sense that you mention all these areas of growth. In the 3 years that agric grew, industry grew, services grew, all those areas grew to the point where you felt that we were this. And then 3 weeks of COVID shut it down, and basically we were not able to fall back on any of those significant growth for 3 years, such that within 3 weeks we're back to zero.
Yes. So
what kind of growth is that?
See, Godfred, you have an economy whose structure is vastly informal, whose dependence is on import. So that economy is
hold on. Okay. Let's take this. I have time for this. So you borrowed to grow, did you not? The industry, plenty for food and jobs, 1D, 1F, all those things. Did you not borrow?
See,
Did we not borrow, Richard?
Wait on.
Did we not borrow
to
support it?
Hold on. The funding for one district, one factory, it's in part.
Some are PPPs.
Yes.
We know those.
And then in part government supported, but then the funding for it is not free. They are discounted. Hold on. They are discounted. No, wait. The support for one district, one factory.
Let's not use semantics.
Just allow me to answer the question.
Did we borrow or not?
Now allow me to answer your question.
Did we borrow or not?
Can I answer your question?
No, you are trying to explain it away.
No.
Essentially, did we borrow? If we did not borrow to support it, just say yes. Did we borrow to support it?
But you can't determine how I answer your question.
No,
you ask the question, I answer the question.
Yes or no?
No, but you can't do that. You ask me a question, you are telling me if you know the answer, then why do you ask me the question?
No, but
Godfred, if you have the answer, why do you ask me the question?
So it's not yes or no.
You ask me a question, let me answer the question.
Okay, answer the question.
Okay? The 1D, 1F is not a free money that is given to companies. It's subsidized interest to drive a certain industrialization agenda. So those will be paid back. So, I mean, I don't get what the question is.
No, my question is,
yes,
we borrowed to do all those things.
What do we do?
No, hold on.
I don't get.
So let me make my point. You borrowed to build this growth. The point you're making.
Which growth?
The numbers you just mentioned. Did we not borrow to support it?
So what's your question?
My question is, how come then that you've borrowed to build that, right? And if indeed you did spend the money in that regard, 3 years of COVID washes all that away, and you are in the situation that you find yourself in. Was it prudent management then?
Godfred.
I'm asking you.
Godfred. There are people in this country who were financially sound, businesses that were financially robust. COVID undermined them. Britain is in the situation it's in.
COVID.
COVID. So what are you guys trying to say when you discount COVID as though that it was just a water or a flash in the pan?
No, nobody is discounting
that for me,
it has become
it is what it is.
You say
No. It is what it
to
is.
wash away your management of the economy, which has not been exactly stellar.
Godfred, I was going to use an example that probably will set emotions, up. But the point I'm telling you is that if I am here, or right now, if I am here in your studio, and the next minute I am no longer here, I am not here. You cannot explain that I was here and so therefore I'm still here even though I'm not here. COVID happened, and so it happened. It is what it is. You can decide to minimize the impact. But I'm telling you that is why Britain is where it is.
But
that is why the whole globe has been set on edge.
But you've also decided then to make COVID your sole excuse for what is obviously poor management.
Because, you see, and that's the problem I have, Godfred. If we're having a conversation in this country in 2017, 2018, 2019, without COVID, okay, you cannot tell me that this economy would have gone down. On the growth trajectory that we're on, you've seen that there's a trend already that can establish for you in 3 years. Because you have a 4-year term, and in 3 years of that 4 years, are you with me? You have 4-year term, and in 3 years of that 4 years, you had grown. So if you are making an average, or if you are judging somebody based on 4-year performance, then you are able to say that the person passed. The person did excellently well. A growth of 7% on average, 3 years out of 4. And then in the 4th year, something happened. So I'm your student. And you're grading me. First year, I did well. Second year, I did well. Third year, I did well. And final year, I got sick. And I didn't come to school. I didn't attend and perhaps wrote not all the papers. And then you saw that my 4th year results went down. As a teacher, what would you say? Would you say I was a bad student?
No, but
yes. So the government
you were
has
being
managed.
supervised within that period because you were under an IMF program, were you not?
But NDC was under IMF program.
During that period that you are talking about.
No, there's no problem. I'm saying that we didn't go to the IMF. We inherited that, and we managed ourselves out of it. And I'm saying that the NDC was under IMF, and they were not performing. They missed all their macroeconomic indicators, even in the 2016 report. You understand? So I'm just telling you, let's not begin to do that. What I think, Godfred, is that
2 minutes, then wrap up.
Yeah. I think that by and large, yes, of course, people are prejudiced in having this conversation because it's a political environment, personal interest is involved, but we need to move away from the conversation and see that in looking at the NDC's record and the NPP's record.
Nobody cares. Nobody looks at you.
But I'm saying that. No, please. You have to care. You see, it's not very scientific to say nobody cares. It is.
Well, you are the government.
No, I'm just saying that.
Who cares about opposition?
Look.
You are the government.
But listen, it's like my father and your father. Okay, your father is not able to take you to the best school because he doesn't have what the means to take you there, and he takes you to a Saito school and you did well. You should care because your father did what he could. If my father has money to take me to the best school and he took me there and I didn't even perform, I should care. Okay? My father should care that I didn't perform because he took me to the best school. So you cannot say that you don't care about the facts of our history. The NDC vis-a-vis us vis-a-vis ourselves with the 2017-18 growth that I've told you.
What we care is the now, which is MPP government discussing IMF. We'll take a break.
No, but you see, Godfred, that's very unfair.
Welcome back to the big issue discussing the economy, but we are moving on.
So you didn't allow me to wrap up.
No, I have moved on to discuss Galamsey.
And it was a very unfair point that you wrapped up on.
No, it's my point to make. That's why I'm the host. To discuss another big issue, Galamsey, and I'm sure by now most of you would have seen the videos that came from the Eastern region. We've been discussing this, like I said, a couple of years ago, Citi FM took it upon itself as a media entity to raise awareness, to bring the whole illegal mining scourge to the attention of the country. Did several programs on it. We're joined by other media entities. A coalition was formed, caught the government's attention. They eventually decided to act. They've gone through several programs, spent considerable amounts of money. Committees have been formed. army refitted national security interagency cooperation. Not much progress seems to have been made, at least to the ordinary eye. And if you follow the news this week, you would ask yourselves, where is the progress? The minister, Samuel Abu-Jinapor, was in the Ashanti region checking out a couple of places. He was in a place called Dantano in the Amansia South District. You can buy yourself a copy of the Daily Graphic and see what is happening there. Then we had shooting incidents between legal miners somewhere. Then we had one in the western region as well, where an Akoto mining and the logging giant Samatex in Samraboy, where the ministry have had to issue a statement to basically a cease and desist to this mining company, Akoto, to stop mining in forest reserves. And I hope it is not just a warning. They go and prosecute, because you're not supposed to be mining there in the first place. And just even to help you, I'm going to give you a basic wrap-up of headlines this week in news. 7 hours ago, Asante Hen is talking. Who is in charge of security? Why have we not been able to stop Galamsey? That's the Asante Hen. And then Galamsey video shows gun battle between task force and illegal miners. I just spoke about that. We will drag government to court if it fails to fight Galamsey. It is the prophet of Galamsey. Chibi residents bemoan as their circuit court floods. And the residents say, well, this is the prophet of Galamsey for you. Let's expose illegal miners. Galamsey is a threat to our survival. This is the GMA, Ghana Medical Association, to Ghanaians. The armed forces also responding to some questions, and they are saying that reports that soldiers provide security for illegal miners are untrue. So they are explaining themselves away. Police arrest 16 suspects over Asamai Tamfo shooting incident. Everybody's worried. The stories are just everywhere, every part of the country. Well, with the exception of perhaps Accra and a few other regions, the Galamsey seems to be everywhere. The northern and upper regions, western region, Ashanti region. We seem to have been swamped. So we'll hear from the Lands and Natural Resources Minister, Samuel Abdullahi Jinapor, on his tour. And then we'll also hear from the Kibi Divisional Police Command on this Asamai Tamfo shooting. Then when we come back, you will hear from some scientists, and then Richard as well is still with us, and then also from the Ghana Cocoa Board. We hope to have Fifi Boafo join us as well, because they are also affected significantly, and cocoa does a lot for this country. But cocoa farmers, some seem to have given up because they find it just more profitable to sell off their farms these days. So we'll catch up quickly and then have a conversation.
Military deployments to some mining districts in the Ashanti region this week led to the arrest of one person and the seizure of some mining equipment used for illegal mining activities. The minister joined the military in areas where the recent clampdown was carried out and expressed his disappointment at the level of destruction.
All of you can see the level of devastation. It should baffle all of us as citizens, as policy makers, and as stakeholders in this fight, how an operation like this in the heart of the forest and in the faraway areas of our country can go on without notice by police, the chiefs, the local political leadership, assembly people, the district chief executive. And I should do the Minerals Commission here. And these are questions that I, as minister, am going to be seeking answers for. How is it the case that such an operation can be mounted and such level of devastation can happen when there is a district outfit of the Minerals Commission, which you have an inspectorate division, when there's a police command here, when there's a district chief executive.
The minister says the government will continue to deploy the military to clamp down on the activities of illegal miners.
The president, his government, and people of Ghana are truly, truly grateful for the work you do. I've been Minister for Lands and Natural Resources for almost 2 years now, and I've been to all manner of places. I've been to all the 16 regions of Ghana. I've been to mining operations, but coming here,
is an eye-opener for me, because I never even imagined that this illegal mining can take place in such hinterlands. And for you to be locked up here and clearing up the place and making sure that we clean up our environment and rid the country and the environment of illegal miners and their activities, I think that you deserve a huge applause from myself, from the president, from the government, and the people of Ghana. So thank you very much and bravo.
The Ghana Armed Forces also pledged its continuous support in the fight against illegal mining.
We did this operation just on Monday, and as you are aware, military operations we will normally plan before we do the operations. We come on reconnaissance sometimes once, twice, just to confirm locations. And sometimes the Mineral Commission also gives us coordinates and the areas that they think are so bad. So, like, we've done it a couple of times, but it appears it has to be sustained. So, from the directions from the Honorable Minister, we did this operation on Monday, and we are still continuing. But the interviews that we've had with citizens and locals within this catchment area tells us that their livelihoods, particularly their water and their fowls, have been devastated. So I believe that the war against the environment will be won. And I know with the assurance from the Honorable Minister, we will actually succeed. Of course, but it has to be sustained. And I believe he will ensure that we sustain this operation.
Indigenes engaging in illegal mining activities in Datano and other communities in the Amansia South municipality have blamed foreign nationals for the destruction caused to the environment.
And the to be by the floor, by the cata, and Abesan, the commendable any idea factory.
The Japadiano must see zero. Omunya Maya, Crown Member, and Farmer Boy, and Yamanano. And so, boys, as you know, Saturday, once I heard this stand for Fina. The only idea before the Nemua, China for the number and the Nabe of Fino. But Mobaka, Obramotam, Romajai. And as you was what Tanya Siziana, but threatened to keep the bear. After 5 years come,
the Deputy Information Minister, Fatih Abubakar, who was part of the trip, called for a concerted effort to deal with the menace.
Impacts of the destruction of our communities. Except that we are not going to wait for generations before we feel the impact. The impact on our water bodies, the impact on our water system, the impact on our health, the minerals that are entering our foodstuff, the kind of number of cases, kidney cases that they are recording at Konfanochi Teaching Hospital and others. What the medical doctors are saying is that if we don't nip the situation in the bud today and say we are waiting until some other day, it won't work. But I'm saying I don't live here, the minister doesn't live here. He will act upon intelligence, he will act upon information. The people are the ones who are on the ground. They are the people that if we get their buy-in, together with the assembly members and the district assembly and the chief executive, and also with the security agencies, we'll be able to make some meaningful impact.
Well, that was the Deputy Information Minister wrapping up that report. And just to catch up with that, the National Security Minister has also spoken on this matter, such as the concern. And he says that the National Security Strategy adopted to stop illegal mining in rivers and forest reserves is undergoing revision. And he says the revision will help make the strategy more robust and effective. Quote, the strategy is under review because we need to find a more effective way of stopping the degradation. A more effective way of stopping the degradation. So the other components of that conversation that he had. But let me talk to Dr. Albert Kobna-Mensah. He's a research scientist with the CSIR. This week, he has spent a lot of time discussing Galamsey and how we might be better equipped to make a dent in the advance of the illegal miners, because it does look like they are advancing. When you have 4 football field size Galamsey pits, you know you have a problem in the town. Dr. Mensah, good morning. Dr. Mensah, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Godfred.
Thank you for joining us and honoring our invitation. You are saying, please put on your video if you can, Dr. Mensah.
My video is actually on, as you can see.
Oh, okay. All right.
But my camera is not working.
All right, no problem. It's the knowledge we need, so we'll hear you rather than watch you.
I will display my picture.
No problem. But your paper this week spoke about chasing the miners into the bush. This might not be the solution. What have you made of the strategy that has been in place so far, and what are your suggestions for improving the strategy?
Thank you so much, Godfred, for having me, and it's my pleasure speaking to quite a session of Ghanaians on this very debatable issue and highly controversial in our Ghanaian media space. Permit me to answer this question. I would like to share a number of issues, a number of thoughts that could actually help in advancing the argument, and not just to advance the argument, but to sustainably reform the sector for the benefit of all of us as Ghanaians. So permit me to share some screen. Sorry for the noise at the background.
No problem. But
yeah,
go
permit
on.
me to share a screen to be able to answer this question. I would like to share a screen so that Ghanaians will appreciate the argument very well when it comes to the issue of artisanal and small-scale mining sector. If that is okay with you.
That is okay with me, but you can just begin whilst you do that. Yeah, you can just start sharing your thoughts whilst you share the screen.
Okay, so I think it said host disabled participant screen sharing.
All right, then just go on. Don't worry. Then just go on and let's take it from there.
Okay. Can you enable my screen sharing?
We will try, but in the moment, let's just hear you. We are in the process of doing it, so let's just hear you.
Okay, so it's really a topical issue, and I was listening to the videos that were being played about people saying that we are going to stop Galamsey, we are going to fight Galamsey, we are going to fight the menace. I am a great advocate of sustainable mining, and I do not want people to take me off the line that my argument is sort of in favor of irresponsible mining. I am for sustainable mining, and I think that the issue about the small-scale mining sector had not been handled really well, and that we need to change strategy. Godfred, if we see the use of the military against artisanal miners, it did not start today.
Mm-hmm.
It started in the 1980s. In the 1980s, they used the police to chase the miners into the bush, arrested them, and there were many human rights abuses, and many were arraigned before court. At the end of the day, the miners still came back and they were mining. It continued to 1990. They still used the police task force to confiscate their equipment. They arrested them. There were many accounts of human rights abuses. The miners still came back. Then we came back to the 2000s. In the 2006, the government also set up a task force called Operation Fight Illegal Mining. They caused many human rights abuses. They seized their equipment, and the same strategy the miners returned at the end of the day. Then we came to 2013. 2013, Mohammed's government set up a military task force again. And the task force also meted out same human rights abuses. Always they seized equipment, and it is the same strategy. At the end of the day, miners returned. Then in 2017, they set up another military task force called Operation Vanguard. It is interesting that the name is always Operation, and they use the same style. At the end of the day, the miners returned in 2017. Then we came again in 2021. Then they set up Operation Halt. Operation Halt carried out with 4 main operations. There were issues of human rights abuses. There were equipment that were seized. There were deportations. There were arrests. There were some arrests being made. The miners did return, and the miners are still returning. That this synopsis I've shared with you earlier tells us that there's something wrong with the strategy we have been using. And we do not always have to use a system or a strategy that failed in the past to address a present system. What in the nutshell communicates to us is that the use of the military against artisanal miners may not be the solution. So we need to change course. Permit me that my argument may not sink down well with many Ghanaians.
Oh, do go on. It's your research, so go on.
But then I am speaking from a research point of view. There have been countless number of research findings that point to us that the use of the military is not the way to go, and that when you use the military, the end result is that there's going to be cyclic effect of environmental pollution. Now, over here, I would like to critique the use of the military in a bit. Why the military has not been able to solve the problem is that, one, mining forms an integral part of the people's livelihood in many mining communities. Now, when something forms an integral part of the people's living ecosystem, you do not use force to take it away from them. You rather use a JoJo approach to use that particular system, that particular livelihood strategy to benefit the people. You know why I'm saying that? You know, over the years, people believe that their grandfathers have told them that the gold that is found on the land were handed over to them by their grandfathers. Now, because the gold was handed over to them by their grandfathers, they feel they have the natural entitlement to till the land. They have the natural entitlement to use their land for the purpose they so wish. But then, in the Ghanaian mining law, any mineral found on the surface, under either the surface of the land or beneath, is vested in the government or is vested in the president. So you need to seek licensure to be able to mine it and mine it sustainably. Okay, but here is the case: they feel that they have not been treated well. They feel that they have been marginalized. Why do they feel that they have been marginalized? When you go to mining communities, many mining communities, you find poverty is endemic. Now, because poverty is endemic, the people over there do not have the skills, especially they have low skills, and many mining corporations are also there. These many mining corporations are not absorbing the local indigenes. They are not absorbing the local indigenes because they feel that the local indigenes do not have what it takes to be employed by the mining corporations, because mining corporations need sophisticated skills to be able to be employed. But these skills are lacking in many mining communities, so they are not employing the local folks. So the local folks are also like, okay, we are sitting on our land, right? And you have come to mine on our land, and you are not employing us because you think we are underdogs. So we are also going to dig for justice. So the people who are doing the small-scale mining, they feel they are digging for justice. So that's what they call digging for justice and digging for survival, because they feel that that is the way to sort of pay back with their land that have been confiscated away from them. My brother, when you go to many mining communities like Obuasi, like Fistia, their names actually came about because of the mining. Small-scale mining or artisanal mining is the oldest form of mining in the country. The mining had perpetuated for more than 300 years. Now, before the arrival of large-scale mines, we were already mining. We were doing our mines. Then, in 1989, the PNDC government brought about reforms, which was called the Economic Recovery Program. The Economic Recovery Program were structural adjustments that were done to the economy in order to harness the potential the economy has for the people. And because of that, it means that before you be able to take the land, you are supposed to seek license. That was when small-scale mining or artisanal miners became illegal. Because before you can mine, you are supposed to seek license. Now, so before the arrival, they were still mining. Now, when you go to Prestia, the name Prestia actually came about because of artisanal small-scale mining or because of mining. Prestia, there was a British, or there was an Englishman called Princeton. Princeton used to construct well in the mining community in Prestia. So people were like, we are going to Princeton well to fetch water. So the name became Prestia. It's a corrupted word from Princeton.
Oh, okay.
So these underpinnings that I've given you tell us that the way to go may not be the military strategy, but there are underlying factors that must be addressed. These underlying factors could be structural, they could be economic, they could be political, they could be institutional, they could be technological. Maybe if we want me to still go ahead, then I would like to share my screen to be able to continue this particular argument that I am making.
I think we are still working on that. So if you can make progress without it, we'll very much appreciate it.
I can even share. It is available now.
Okay.
I want to share because I want us to appreciate the argument and that the argument should be diversified. I agree that small-scale or artisanal miners are destroying our water bodies. I agree. I hold a PhD in environmental soil sciences, and I deal with restoration and reclamation and remediation of arsenic-contaminated gold mine sites. So I am perfectly much aware, but the argument has been one-sided, and that we need to be holistic in the argument. When it comes to one of the reasons why the miners are still returning to the mine site, is that they feel that the mining ecosystem in Ghana is biased. The mining ecosystem is biased against the artisanal miners, but rather they are lackadaisical in favor of the large-scale mining corporations. Why am I saying this? Mine, regardless of its form of production or regardless of the scale of production, is environmentally not friendly. Permit me to add that the large-scale mining corporations equally cause environmental nuisance. They pollute the environment. At the end of the day, they don't reclaim the land. I worked on a field in southwestern Ghana that measures more than 126,000 meters square. Now, this land had been abandoned since 2002, and it has become a breeding ground for mosquitoes, breeding ground for playgrounds, breeding grounds for children to play, and it serves as a pathway for women to their farms and men. This field that I'm talking about was not left by small-scale miners. The field was not degraded by small-scale miners, but it was left by large-scale mining corporations. Now, this field, I did an analysis, and the field contains arsenic of more than 8,000 milligrams per kilogram. Now, when we talk about arsenic, we are talking about the recommended threshold of 0.68 or 6.8 milligrams per kilogram. Now, this field contains arsenic of more than 8,000 milligrams per kilogram.
So in other words, it's not usable.
Small-scale miners. It has gone beyond the age of repair or the point of recovery. But then, how come the law is not dealing with the mine company that left the land abandoned without reclamation? How come the law is not dealing with them? We did a review since 1980 up to 2021. We realized that since 1980, more than 30 mining laws have been enacted. And you know what? Only 11 pieces of these laws contain snippet of information about artisanal mining. This, in effect, tells you that the law is made to favor large-scale mining corporations and to be against artisanal miners. Meanwhile, in the mining law, which was amended in 2018, also amended in 2019, the mining Act 703 stipulates that the small-scale mining sector is solely meant for the people of Ghana, and that any Ghanaian who is above 18 years and above can apply for license to mine. Now, if we have set this thing in the law, how come that we are criminalizing the sector and that people are not able to mine freely? Why am I saying this? In 2017, they placed a ban on artisanal mining, and the ban was extended also to those who even hold license to be able to mine legally. The ban was to last for 6 months. It later was extended to 2 years. And that particular ban, I'll come back to this one. I want us to take a look at that particular ban, what it did. And that particular ban, when it was done in 2017, these were the effect on the people. There were collapse of the local economy. It pushed many people in mining communities into poverty, and the ban increased insecurity in many mining communities. And what have you? So, and the issue is that, the law is always made to be in favor of the large-scale mining corporations and to bias against the small-scale mining corporations. In 2018, the government gave a tax exemption to a large-scale mining corporation, and the tax exemption was amounting to more than $259 million United States dollars, and it was supposed to last for 22 years. Now, you know what is going to happen? Interestingly, this is going to help the large-scale mining corporation to expand their production into new concessions. And you know what is going to happen when they expand their production into new concessions? They are going to strip vegetations. They are going to take people's livelihood, because they are going to take over lands, and their water bodies are going to be polluted because they are going to release toxic elements into the environment, and poverty is going to be deepened in many mining communities. But it must be emphasized here. It must be emphasized here that the actual type of mining that has more effect on the economy in any mining community is the small-scale mining or the artisanal mining. You know why I'm saying that? The large-scale mining itself does not really have an impact on the local economy. The large-scale mining corporations do not really have an impact on the local economy, especially in the mining communities where they host them. The actual type of mining that has the real impact on the local economy of the people is the artisanal small-scale mining. Why am I saying this? One, when mining is done, the mining companies pay a revenue. They pay royalties of, I think, 7%. These royalties of 7% that is paid to the mining to the government by the mining companies. 80% of this 7% goes to the central government. 80%. You know how much comes to the local community? 20. Now I am going to break down how much actually gets to the community. Now 80% goes to the central government. So that tells you that people are in Obuasi, people are in Pistia, people are in Konongo. They mine their gold, then they take all this revenue or benefit. They take 80% to the central government. Then they bring 20% to the local community. And you know what happens? The 20% that comes to the local community, don't forget that 10% is used for the regulatory institutions like the mineral commissions, like the EPA, and what have you. Then 10% is disbursed. And out of this 10%, some go to the local stool, some go to the district assembly, and only 1.8% ends up in the community for any development. And what makes it more dire is the fact that this 1.8% that comes to the local community, there is no law that stipulates how it should be disbursed and how it should be used. And because of issues of corruption and what have you, the money may not even be used for the intended purpose. Now, this analysis that I've given you tells you that the mining that is done in host mining communities does not benefit the people. And so they only need the small scale because people do not actually need sophisticated skills to be able to enter, and it does not need heavy investment to be able to enter.
Okay.
So why not rather? Why not? I'm coming. Why not rather use this to be able to benefit the people? Why not rather reform the sector? Why not regulate the sector so that the people will be able to benefit? You know, the large-scale mining corporation seems to be doing something. They seem to be doing something right, and the small scale seems to be doing something wrong. Why? Because the large scale is properly regulated, and the small scale is relegated to the background. So these are some of the dynamics that we may need to consider in reforms towards the sector. Okay. And when it comes to reforms towards the sector, for instance, how about if I want to establish my small scale mining company, how about relaxing the licensing regime so that I can get my license within a day, so that I can register my mine within a day? How about that? Instead of putting the office in Accra, and that if I live in Obuasi, I have to go all the way to Accra to go and get a license to get my mine registered. How about bringing the offices to the doorstep of the host mining communities? Okay. Now, when you do some of these things, it means that you are helping to reform the sector, and you are helping to get the small-scale mining running. I have read, and there have been numerous research that have been conducted that tell you that the miners will have to travel so many distances from their areas of operation to the licensing office in Accra, and some of them it takes so many years, like 2 years, before they get their license. And there are so many bureaucratic, cumbersome processes. Some will have to end up paying some money sideways. And all this serve as a disincentive for people to register their mine. The end result is galamsey. Instead of him to wait all this long to get his license, he rather take up his tool and go and mine. So there are countless number of factors that actually facilitate some of these things that are happening. And that is why, my brother, that is why I am so sorry to say here that no amount of military strategy can stop the people from engaging in the galamsey. No amount of military strategy, but the fundamentals should be solved. The fundamentals that have to do with the licensing, the fundamentals that have to do with livelihood, the fundamentals that have to do with the regulation, and a whole lot. Maybe let me.
No, hold on. You've done quite a bit of a job for me. So I'll take a break. When I come, we'll hear from Dr. Jesse Ivo from the Institute for Environmental and Sanitation Studies, and then Richard is still with me. I want to get two parts, but Dr. Albert Kobna-Mensah putting things into perspective for me. I like the work that you have done and the dynamics that you have brought in trying to explain why the jackboot approach, as some have called it, has not worked, and that in the face of so much force around the country, we still seem to have a thriving illegal mining space. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the big issue, just trying to understand the dynamics of why this war against galamsey victory looks so far away, or even progress, if we won't attain victory, some kind of progress, but it's not happening. So Dr. Albert Kobna-Mensah from the CSIR has explained why he thinks the current strategy will not work. Dr. Jesse Ivo is a senior research fellow, Institute for Environmental and Sanitation Studies from the University of Ghana. Dr. Ivo, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Godfred.
Thank you for joining us.
And good morning to your listeners.
Yes. I'm sure you heard your colleague from the CSIR, Dr. Kobna-Mensah, sharing his thoughts on the dynamics. He gave us a bit of a background, the dynamics of small-scale mining, its history, and why its entrenched nature within the communities is why the strategy might need a rethink. What are your thoughts on what is happening, especially from the environmental perspective? He made mention of a massive field somewhere that basically is completely unusable as we speak. It cannot be reclaimed, nothing can be done to it.
Yes, thank you very much once more. And I think Dr. Mensah is very right. We carried out some work in the eastern region, specifically Achim West District. And we analyzed some satellite data, and we realized that the areas covered by grass, seems to be increasing. Seems to be increasing as compared to background areas, comparing the data from 10 years, to now. And but our close observations show that those areas supposedly covered by grass is not actually grass, but these areas are, abandoned pits which have been overgrown with waterweeds. And so it's very deceptive if you are not careful and you think these areas are just grassland, and you venture into those areas, you are going to get drowned. We were told in Kwabin that about 5 lives have been lost in recent past. Innocent lives. Some are children, school children, going out into the bush to do their own thing, and they got drowned in some of these pits because they are so covered. So indeed, the land is very much devastated, very, very devastated, and you need to go to these areas to see things for yourself. I agree broadly with him in most of the issues he mentioned, particularly the livelihood issues with the local communities. Yes, it is true that it is livelihood that is pushing most of the indigenes into these activities. But then the question is it only the local, the indigenes or the local people who are involved in this? If you look at the data from the 1960s to about the present time, you will notice that small-scale mining has been increasing, and in fact, it started increasing from 1989, as he rightly explained, from 1989 when the ban on small-scale mining was lifted. So it started increasing from that time, but incidentally, that also coincided with the increasing price of gold on the world market. So by 2005, this attracted a lot of foreigners, particularly Chinese. In fact, from 2005, 2006 to the present time, we've had a lot of Chinese, invading these areas. And I saw some data which indicated that, or which suggested that we have about 50,000 Chinese operating, in Ghana as small-scale miners. So the small-scale mining is not only limited to the local people. Foreigners are involved, and that is what is causing the devastation, and that's what is causing the problem. If we are able to weed the foreigners out, then probably we can start thinking of what to do. Even with the small-scale mining, there are several aspects to it. We have what we call the tributary mining, and that is also causing a lot of problems, where we have large companies which go for the concession because of the licensing regime. The difficulty in obtaining licenses is the big companies which are able to acquire these licenses. But most of the time, these companies don't engage in the mining activities themselves. They sublease to smaller operators, and these operators, go and they go and hire equipment. They pay for this equipment, and so we like to work, at the rate that they will make their returns, so that they can pay for the equipment and then pay these large-scale miners. In fact, at the time of our visit to the field, we were told that the small-scale operators were paying about 20% of their revenue, or whatever they derive, to these large-scale operators. And they pay some amount to these same operators for reclamation, and pay some to the district assembly or something like that. So these large-scale operators collect these monies. They take their interest, which is the 20%, and then they collect the money for reclamation, but they don't do it. They don't do the reclamation. So at the end of the day, the small-scale operators who are the tributary miners go ahead, exploiting and devastating the areas, pay money to these large-scale operators, and then nothing is done. But we have a monitoring system. The Forestry Commission, the Minerals Commission, how do you call it? Yes, the Mineral Commission is there. The district assemblies are there. So you ask yourself, who is monitoring? Who is not working?
In moving on, Dr. Jezaivo, I rarely hear the EPA get mentioned. And I've heard other academics say the EPA particularly might be a useful tool if it is empowered properly to deal with some of the things that the Minerals Commission and the ministry are trying to handle.
Yes, the EPA can be very effective in this area, in managing the situation. But the EPA is more or less centralized. In fact, they are centralized in Accra. They are supposed to have the centralized units in the districts. But you ask yourself, how many, how much are they capacitated at the local level? You go to the district assemblies. Sometimes you have only one or two staff representing EPA, and they cannot do much for the reason that they are fighting livelihood issues. People are fighting for their livelihoods. That's why they are into these activities. So yes, it will be good we capacitate the EPA to take up the mantle, but for now, they are not able to do much because they don't have the capacity. And so the impacts are very huge. In fact, most of the impacts that we hear about, things we see in the media and things we hear on radio and things like that. But when you go down to the ground and you begin to talk to the people, that is where you see the gravity of the issue. Cocoa sellers, approach a cocoa seller, and cocoa seller will tell you that, look, formerly I used to just walk down the stream to fetch water to prepare my cocoa. Now she has to buy about 4 or 5 sachet water, 4 bags of sachet water to prepare the same amount of cocoa that she used to get water for free. So you ask yourself, what impact is that making in her life? Communities, we depend on water bodies. It's not just about the color or even the drinking of the water, but sometimes the cultural attachment to these water bodies. In the Achim area, they pride themselves from drinking from the river Birim. It's a pride to say that I drink from river Birim. In fact, that was what we were told. But today it is not so. Most of them used to do fishing from these river bodies. Now they no more get those things. And so for the local people, it's not only about livelihood. They are aware that even though these activities are ongoing, their livelihoods are being destroyed. Their cultural values are being distorted. Their socioeconomic, values are being undermined. You go to certain areas, you see children, young girls pregnant. You ask parents, they tell you, well, the children have money. The children are chasing after money. We have high rate of school dropout and truancy in these areas, and a lot of things are going on, on the ground, which we may not be aware of. And so for me, we really need to sit up. Dr. Mensah said the military approach is not working and will not work, and I think I agree with him. The community mining system that the government is proposing, I think is a very laudable idea, but is the approach that perhaps may not give us the needed results or the results that we expect. How do we monitor this system? It is good we reserve mines for the community people. But how do we regulate it so that we will not allow these foreigners to come in again? We will not be enticed by the huge monies that the Chinese are pumping in to allow the Chinese to continue causing devastation. And in most of the communities, Godfred, people are not happy about the way Chinese, are involved in these activities. We went somewhere. We spoke to somebody on the field. I just don't want to mention the area. Mm-hmm. And the person told us when these Chinese come in, they create an enclave for themselves. They don't even hire rooms in the communities for the communities to benefit. They create enclaves for themselves, and then thereafter they arm themselves. They have a way of, preparing their own food. They bring their own food from China, or sometimes they grow vegetables around where they are. So their presence don't actually benefit the communities. And most of the time, these Chinese even smuggle the gold that they mine. They smuggle it out. So you ask yourself, what are we benefiting from, the invasion of Chinese into this sector? Recently, I heard that the National Identification Authority has registered about 34,000 Chinese so far. So you ask yourself, what sectors are these Chinese? What are they doing? Do we know where they are? Do we monitor what they are doing? I know there are nice Chinese gentlemen there. In fact, most of them are doing very great things. But some of them are doing things that, are uncalled for. Not helping. And are not helping. So my question is, are the authorities not aware of all this? Now, so to tackle this problem, we first of all need to, we need a total restructuring. You ask yourself, why would people, sell their cocoa farms to these illegal miners? Our analysis showed that a 2-acre land of cocoa plantation at the current price of cocoa will give the farmer about 10,560 Ghana cedis per year. That is a 2-acre farmland of cocoa. Now, this farmer can sell that same farm to galamsey operators and will earn about 10 times more than this. So it means that the cocoa farming itself has become unattractive. We always boast of being an agrarian country. And so, in the literature, you see that our backbone is agriculture. But you ask yourself, how is even the sector, how is the sector operating now? How if you really want to see the production in this sector, how is that sector operating? In the 70s and the 80s, agri was contributing about 60%, 50% to the national economy. Now it's less than 30%. So our priorities are not being set right. We are not taking advantage of where our comparative advantage is highest, and so we open up the economy for people like foreigners to come in and even take away the livelihood of our own people. So yeah, for me that is my
okay. Those are your thoughts on the matter. All right. Thank you, Dr. Jesse. Let me come in, Richard. So you've heard from the scientific perspective what they feel is happening. I'm sure you'd also have observed as a citizen of this country what is happening with the illegal mining space and the attempts by the state and its partners to at least bring some sanity in there. Your thoughts?
Yes, Godfred, I think I'd like to read this research your panelists just presented. It appears to have some...
Dr. Kobna Mensah.
Yes, it's very interesting.
He presented it yesterday.
Okay. I took note of where he mentioned about the community people in a manner almost rebelling to say they are also going to dig for justice and for survival, which is manifest in some videos we're seeing over the period. I think last week there was an elderly man who talked about, moving away from cocoa to mine, and therefore, he's entitled to it. So it's interesting. I think those research would give very invaluable, insight into how we manage this forward. But what I think we have to do more in communicating government's position on this matter is to be able to demonstrate the interventions that government is making to ensure that, one, mining is done legally, big or small, and two, that there are alternative outlets for young people in these communities, that it doesn't become a choice between an illegality or necessarily mining as the default position. If you can choose, in other words, provide options. And I think government is doing that. What is missing is that we need to promote that more. And Godfred, afterwards I can have a conversation with you to see how we can engage this matter, because just last week we had an interaction with the Deputy Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, and some of the issues they brought to the fore about how they are intervening, not only directly trying to stop the act, but intervening in creative ways that provides avenue for mining. Because clearly, based on the research, it was clear that you cannot stop mining. Mining has been part of our history, and so therefore we have the gold, people want to mine it. The only thing is that you have to find a way to mine it. It would be travesty to say we have gold and the gold is in demand, but we live in this country, we can't mine gold. The thing there is to mine it responsibly, and I think that's where government is trending. The research that Doc presented actually made a point that I think is being taken care of. I'll talk to you briefly about some of the things government is doing. And by key one that it says is about the licensing regime contributing to why
decentralizing it.
Yes, why people are doing illegal mining. But right now, as we speak, that is being done. So people can actually obtain mining licenses without necessarily having to come to Accra.
Are there districts?
Yes. So at the district offices, and then you can actually do it online. What the Chief Executive of Mineral Commission talked about, and I think is very classic, is that you go to a point where you can, when you have the site where you identify for mining, you pick the coordinates and all of that, you can actually send it to them online, right? And then they would then process it and then have the licenses done for you. I think the system they have there is MCAS, is it Mining Custodial something, right? It's a MCAS.
Just a matter of maybe improving it. Isn't that a bit far away? If you listen to the people, for instance, from Dantano on the video where Fatih, your colleague, was, for instance, they're not formally educated. How is that person who wants to also mine going online to even figure out the platform?
No, but I'm just saying that it's an added feature.
Okay.
Where you can do it online, or you go to the district office. So the physical presence of the office is there, but then also you can do it online if you want an expedited thing. I think I just want to get a name for you. It's okay. It's the development. It's a minerals cadastral administration system, right? That's called the MCAS, and so they have that, which is facilitating that. So that addressed that. I think that the research probably they missed that in their reviews of the literature available on that. So that is being done. The mining, small-scale mining, is being advanced. Responsible small-scale mining, community mining is being promoted. So on the sidelines, these are being done and is facilitating. I think I'll share the full report. Maybe we can collaborate with Citi to kind of do a documentary or a full discussion on what interventions are happening. And also there is the alternative the National Alternative Employment and Livelihood Program. That has not been emphasized enough also. It's also an intervention providing outlets for young people. So the individuals that they're finding in the research...
But is it rigorous enough at the moment?
Yes, it was.
We saw the pilot where 1,400 people or so were trained, but post that, and given other things, but post that, has it really been as intensive as during its initial phases?
Interestingly, that project, the estimate for it is near about 1 million people. The target of the initiative is to go out there and provide avenues for nearly about 1 million people displaced by illegal mining. Now, it's not only by the modules, I think about 4 modules that it has. It has also in that a community mining component that actually also advances people who wants to go there. It has artisanal training, skills training that also gives people the avenue to go there. Reclamation, which and reforestation, which will give people avenue to go there. So these interventions are happening. And what for me is heartwarming is the potential to mine, if that's what people want to do, exists. And it has to be done legally. And that the facilitation for it with the MCAS situation I told you exists. So what we need to do is, one, intensify education and get these communities engaged properly so that they can take advantage of this. But what is the problem, Godfred? Which we cannot lay at the doorstep of government, but lay at the doorstep of all of us, is participation, is citizen participation in this. Maybe the whole challenge has not been dramatized to the point where we see it to be existential. So people think that, it's far away, I live in Accra, so whatever. But we need to see how dramatic this is, how life-changing this could become in a hurry for us. That the water far away in Brim is being affected and you cannot see yourself connected to it. Maybe we need that level so that all of us sitting in Accra, in my village, I can tell people, when you see people showing up in our communities and you don't know what they are doing, and they are supposed to be Chinese or just people who just come into the village area, either they are government appointees or government employees or civil servants and all that. If they are none of those and they are sitting in our communities, you wonder what they are doing. If you see those things, report. Let us become citizens engaged in fighting this. Because first of all, this is the only country we have. If others mess it up for us, and we enable them to mess it up for us, they may be gone, and we'll be left holding the short end of the stick. That is the component I think we need to address. And it takes you, it takes me. That's why I'm proposing that participation, collaboration, to try and have this education. I know Citi guys are good, to get to the point where we dramatize this so everybody sees it, that it's existential. We don't do anything, it gets to swallow all of us. That's the point I think we have to get to. That is the sticky point where we need to. I think, fortunately, the ministry led by the Minister, Honorable Abu Jinapo, is engaging. I think just on the 28th or so, there was some engagements with civil society organizations, stakeholders in that sector, to try to figure out a way. I hope that will drive us to a point where all of us will come face to face with the reality and say that, look, we cannot ignore this. We cannot see this to be other people's fight. We cannot see this to be the government's fight in isolation. We are all collectively and jointly involved in this, and we must fight it together. So communities where there are mining, and it's happening, the people there cannot be absolved from what is happening. So we need to stimulate them to become aware of what their role is, enabling or disenabling the act, so that we can fight this fair and square. The participation of the soldiers and the rest of those, it is to try to create a deterrent position so people don't go and engage in that. It may be working, it may not be working, but what is not working, I know that for a fact. What is not working is that we, the citizens, have disengaged, and that is costly. And that, for me, is really the Achilles heel in the fight against Galamsey.
Thank you very much, Richard Ahiagba, Director of Communications of the MPP. A very big thank you to Dr. Albert Kobna-Mensah, Research Scientist from the CSIR, Dr. Jesse Ivo, Senior Research Fellow, Institute for Environmental and Sanitation Studies. Also, a big thank you earlier on to Dr. Richmond Etiahene, Dr. Sio Champon, and Franklin Kujo, President of Imani Africa, for joining us as we discuss the economy. I will end by simply saying, yes, this war against Galamsey is not, like Richard said also, it's not just for us. You've started seeing the guns and whatnots. Let's not make it worse. Let's all participate. In the end, we will not get the water, we will not get food. Cocoa farms not working, that means the economy doesn't make money, because it's an economy that relies heavily on cocoa as well. This is a war that we cannot afford to lose. Let me put it that way. You and I, all of us, need to get on board and help win the war against galamsey. And as Citi 97.3 and Citi TV, we will not stop in pushing the education and raising the awareness of all citizenry to the scourge of illegal mining. My name is Godfred Akoto, Boafo. Thank you for watching The Big Issue. Have a good weekend.